Hello, welcome to the third seasonal our True Anime Seasons End podcast. Wow, what a title! Uh, Unlike previous seasons, we have the amazingly cool and cute host Contessa. That's me hosting it this year because Kai's too lazy, you see, to even do this job because he just needs to make those YouTube bucks and force all of us to work for him. Anyways, we don't have very many people right now, but we're going to go ahead and start pretty soon. One rule I want to lay out is I have a timer right next to me on my desk here. It says 5 p.m. on it. I'm going to press that, and it counts down. And once it hits 5 p.m., we're done. Or I'm gonna be mad if we're not done, and we're gonna go fast. So if you hear me telling you to wrap it up, please do. Otherwise, I hope there's no any issues or anything going forward. Furthermore, we're starting with the first show this year, which is Welcome to the Ballroom. Did anyone watch this show?
Yeah.
Thoughts?
I only saw 2 episodes.
I know personally I dropped it after about 2 episodes as well. So
What was it in 2 episodes that you weren't liking?
it's a shonen uh
Sports show?
sports show.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a fan
You
of that genre either, but I figured
yeah.
I'd try it out.
Well, going into the season, it seemed like the show had a lot of hype, not just like amongst people who had read the manga, but just in general. I felt, and as the season moved on, it slowly tapered off, even just in the general conscience for the most part. Um,
That
yeah,
that if anything, that's the number one thing that kind of really held it back. Is that the story wasn't anything past a really protagonist focused shonen sports show. Um, that said, I don't think we can sort of glance over it. There was a ton of hype because it looks so cool. I think it's got some great character designs. It's got some great style. Um, but the one thing I wanted to say about this show is that I thought the the there were some choices made that really harmed it, and mainly the fact that ballroom dance is such a performance art, and you have to show a lot of motion and convey. There's a lot of animation required to convey what's going on in a ballroom dance. And if anything, this show justified the approach Yuri on Ice took to, cut corners to animate the action fluidly. Because there are a number of just like still shots all throughout the show, and then cuts to somebody on the sideline talking about how crazy the movement was. And there's a big disconnect there with like them not showing the movement and then talking about how crazy the movement is.
yeah, for sure. I think that was one of the major big issues, and as much as the show does have a lot of budget to it, except it also does like it has really well animated non ballroom dancing scenes a lot of the time, as I understand it, which is okay.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. And I think we're a couple episodes into the second arc of the show, and it's improved so much in its second season. Some of the character dynamics have shifted around, and the partner the main protagonist is with now is a lot more interesting than the one he was with in the first season. That uh, I don't know. The first season of Welcome to the Ballroom, eh. It's a good sports show.
Uh,
I was so I think that what Kai said is true about the presentation of the show because I think that it is visually lacking like it is derived, which is one of the biggest problems. But I wanted to say that I think that the show is doing a good job in its character department because I like the way the show uses these characters and the way they do the sport to tell us something about the characters and how these characters engage with each other through the sport they are doing. So and I like the show not because it is great as showing us the sport per se, but in the way it shows us these characters and how they engage with the sport.
Yeah, and I don't want to make it sound like this is a bad show by any means, or even a middling show. It's really effective at what it's doing. Aside from conveying the motion of ballroom dance, everything about it is real solid.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. It doesn't sound like there's much more to talk about on this one. If anyone has anything to say, now's your chance. 1, 2, 3. Okay, moving on to some would say the best show of the season. Some would say the best mini arc of the season. Vatican City Meme Masters. Vatican City Miracle Examiner. Who knows? Did anyone besides me watch this?
I
Oh,
saw
yeah.
episode 1.
Oh, you missed out. Oh my god.
I don't know about that.
Nah. This is enjoyable trash is what I
Yeah,
would
it
call
sounds
this
like a
show.
wild ride from what I've heard.
Oh yes, listen. Without going into too much, you get into the in the first arc, Hitler's resurrected body becomes an important plot point,
Well,
and
of course.
that sets the tone. I've seen only a couple episodes past the first arc, which ends at episode 4, and it kind of gets a bit more serious, and in doing so, loses a lot of its spark that first arc had. But for that first arc, oh my god, just whew.
I kind of knew going into it that it was going to be schlocky because I had looked up the titles to the light novels, and one of them was Zombie Murder Mystery. So I kind of knew where it was going after that.
So I would recommend everyone to watch the first 4 arcs, to be honest, because they just frankly hilarious. But afterwards, the show gets worse because the same flaws in the show continue to persist and get even worse. And that is mostly that the show is trying to be a mystery show, but completely fails at doing proper mystery because every plot twist or reveal that is happening completely is written with only the intent to leave the viewer behind so that the show can't be predicted in any reasonable manner. And it makes no sense to guess for it as a mystery because you lack any of the ideas the plot will later use to push itself forward, and there are no characters that ever established like that you could guess a motive behind some characters' actions to get behind the show, because if a character ever gets some characterization, it's after they are revealed to be the culprit or the perpetrator or anything. And the main characters are mostly empty, so it's a very disengaging show because you can neither engage with the plot through the mystery nor you can engage with the characters. So the first 4 episodes are enjoyable because they have great meme value and the way the plot twists are written, but it gets even worse by the end. And not only does the mystery attempt to leave the viewer behind the choices they make, and especially in the last arc, it's completely illogical and relies on plot convenience like hell.
That mostly lines up with what I've heard about the show and what I I watched till episode 6 for the record, and just there's a noticeable it lost a lot of the charm the first arc had, the first 4 episodes there. So you say you would recommend only watching the first 4 episodes?
Yeah, watch the first 4 episodes for memes and then leave it alone.
I'm actually with you there. So anyone else have any opinions?
I was actually pretty excited for this show.
Whoa,
Oh, getting a little.
your mic is dead.
Okay.
Sounds real bad, so.
Um, okay. I'm sorry, Uso. If your mic gets fixed or you get things up, we can back up if you want. But otherwise, I think we're done with The Vatican City Miracle Masters, another great hit from JC's staff. Moving on, we're going to one of the, I'd say the bigger names of this season, the action all-star everyone was waiting for, Rage of Bahumut, Virgin Soul. Did anyone watch it?
Yeah, I did. I don't really have much to say about it. It's all right. I don't like the romance. I thought that had a little too much focus on it, but it ended fine.
What was
All
it
right.
about?
Hello,
And Cow's here.
it's me.
Yes. We've called you for the down low on Rage of Bahamut because no one here except Jean's watched it.
Oh, it's season 2 for one. I just wanted to talk about how it surprised me with how good it was technically, and they did a lot more with the characters than I was expecting. So I really like the camera stuff they did in there. I think not a lot of other anime do it well. Garo's sort of doing it, but that makes sense because I think it's Mappa. Yeah,
It is.
so. But yeah, it does a lot of cool stuff with camera. The first episode has like, I think the best use of camera for comedy I've seen so far.
When you say camera, do you mean just like the directing of the shots, shot composition?
Like camera
or-
movement in
Okay.
animation.
Okay, is there any way you could expand on that a little more?
So the main character gets like she's running and then she gets hit by like, I don't remember what she gets hit by. I think it was a car, like a horse cart thing. And then she starts spinning around in the air, and then you see that it cuts to just the camera on her face, and the background is spinning around vertically in the vertical axis. So that was really funny and really well done. And overall, I think all of the editing and stuff is really snappy. It does slow down a bit in the middle, but I don't know if it needed to be too core. But I ended up really enjoying most of the episodes, and I really liked where all the characters went, except for like one of them, which is some questionable writing. But yeah, it just overall was a surprise. Like, I guess even after I knew what to expect from the first season.
How would you say it compared to the first season? Because I watched that one, and it was all right. Unremarkable, I guess would be the word for it, but nice one. So
Yeah, I like the beginning more, but I also didn't dislike the ending as much as most people. So I thought it was still fine. I thought it was it didn't end up being like that stand out for the plot or anything, but I really did like, or the world building or the character. I just really like the characters and the stuff they did with
you're speaking about the Virgin Soul or the original?
the original.
Okay.
I like the characters and the character art. I think character designs are some of the best.
How would you say the Virgin Soul compares to the original in that sense? Did you find it more entertaining per se, or less entertaining, or?
I think it was for me. I really think there's much of a difference. I know Nia feels differently. I think he likes the first one more for the exploration, and doesn't like the politics as much in the second one. And but yeah, it was never like really a focus for me. It was more of the characters, and they kept that. They added new characters that were also equally strong, and and they did much more with the antagonist character than I was expecting them to at first. So I like that. They probably could have done more, but I do like what they did there. Even though I don't think all of his stuff is super justified, I think they do a good job of showing why that he might think it's justified, and then the price he pays and stuff at the end is, and how it all comes together is, I think, good. And then one of the other characters had a good moment. They resolved quite a lot of things from like leftovers from the first season too, like the thing with Amira at the end, and Favreau like not really being resolved by the end of the first season. You know, they sort of touched back on that, and then they closed that book for Favreau in the end in
Cool.
this season. So I like that, and I think Kaiser has a good arc too. So his actions make a lot of sense.
If I could get you to start rounding this out, would you say then that it's just if you watched like the first season, you should keep watching it?
I like this season better, but I know other people feel differently, so that's my input.
I know we had a couple people pop in during this discussion. Did any of you have anything to say about Bahumut?
I pretty much agree completely with what Kai said. Not Kai, Cal said. I like the second season. I'd say actually quite a bit better than the first season for most of the same reasons. I think the characters are actually a little stronger than in the second season, and like you said, I enjoy the antagonist. I like Nina. I think it really I think it used the first season very well as a springboard. It has some of the same weaknesses, but I think the plot is actually a little bit stronger in the second season. I know some people don't like the politics. To me, like, you know, there are better done politics, but I think this was competently done. And I think there's one character in the last stretch that's kind of a weak point, but aside from that, I thought the whole story was pretty great.
Cool. All right. Any last thoughts? Going 1, 2, 3. All right. Let's move on to the next show, which is Aho Girl. Did anyone here dare to watch this show?
I did not.
I don't think anyone here did. Calling 1, 2, 3. All right, let's move on to a show that was a bit of a dark horse I hear, because I've seen it being mentioned more and more as the season went on, and I know it's continuing into this season. But Magic Circle Guru Guru, adaptation of an old '90s show, I think it is. Did anyone here watch that?
I know Rue watched it. I don't know if he wants to be here. I thought Uso was watching. Is he not here?
It had
Oh, he left.
on the
He left.
survey, it had like 8 votes. Uso's mic was messed up.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't know what the deal is with this show or why.
I watched like 2 episodes. It was funny. I liked it. It was cute. I liked the production values. I liked the aesthetic. It's not something that makes me want to keep compels me to keep watching it, but it's nice. It's like a parody of Dragon Quest type thing, but pretty charming. Cute characters, things like that.
So there's a lot of pretty cool things it does too. Like, it really goes hard on like the old 8-bit aesthetic, where like it does like zoom ins on people's faces, but when it zooms in, it gets pixelated and things like that.
That's cute.
So yeah, I mean, it really wants to like parody the whole like the old like the RPG kind of aesthetic and style that existed back in the day, like SNES, NES. And it does a real good job of like going with that. It's kind of its own thing.
Does it ever slow down in as much? Because I watched
slow down.
I watched the first half of the first episode, and I mean, I love really manic comedies where, you know, they're going mile a minute and whatnot, but Guru Guru was a lot even for me to handle.
So having watched it all, I don't really recall, like, my impression of it, at least, is not that it's that fast paced. That it's fairly, so it is pretty breakneck. Now I'm thinking about it, I didn't really. I mean, there's a lot of I would say that it's not as much going forward at points. I could still say it's pretty, it's comedy and like relatively, but it has the like slow down moments because slow down moments are there. It's it's presented like you would see that in sort of like another show or like during like a big moment in a game. You might have like a cutscene or something, except just something absolutely going on. Um,
Okay.
uh, um, just my experiences. I don't think it's that
That fast.
show really. And that I just can't remember the first episode as well as I can remember the most recent.
It's all
one.
good. So are you continuing it on to this season?
Absolutely, yeah. It's one of my favorite from this season, definitely.
Awesome. I guess that's a recommendation there. Did anyone else watch it? Have anything to say? 1, 2, 3. All right, we're going on to Kodomo Neoko's masterpiece hit Yuri manga here, Netsuzou Trap. I've read the manga on this, so I can speak as my source material, and I also burned the manga, and I've tried to forget everything to do with Kodomo Neoko because
Dang.
she is. I could go on a long rant about how bad all of her works are. But did anyone else watch it?
I watched
Regretted.
I watched it through episode 6. I would say the first 4 episodes I thought were comedy fucking gold for not any of the right reasons, but then it just got bad and not fun. I wouldn't recommend it.
Okay.
I
Thorga?
wouldn't recommend anybody's work, any of her work. I'm with you on that.
Thorga, I saw you. Were you about to say anything?
Yeah, I watched the whole show and I think it's pretty garbage. Like the whole show revolves around basically one conflict, and that conflict exists entirely because characters deliberately fail to communicate with each other, and other characters are acting like either retards or assholes only for the reason because they're acting so, while they never have any established or proper motivation for the action. So it's just like indulging in pointless forced drama for the sake of it, and it gets not only repetitive, it gets really stale and bothersome to watch because there isn't anything engaging in it.
All right. I agree with all that. I would also personally mention just how awful the whole context is. It's called NTR because the two girls are sleeping with each other, not their boyfriends, and it's you would find better drama on your midday, your Days of Our Lives, and all those sorts of shows than this. Let's move on because I hate this show.
Dang.
Teekyuu 9, it's Teekyuu. Did anyone watch it? Or Sire when we need him?
It's just the same shit another season.
That's what I thought. Okay. Now let's move on to a very fascinating and brilliant one. A show I actually could not rate once I got to the end of the season here, just because of how baffling it is. But let's start with the others. 18F. Did anyone here watch 18F?
I did.
Watched the entire thing.
Yes.
Same.
I'd say I watched episode 1 and episode 12.
Okay, Jean, start us off.
The only episode I actually enjoyed was 7. I think it's either 3 or 4 is pretty decent too, but I don't like the rest of the show.
Is that just because of the director format, or do you have?
Oh no, the director format was really interesting. I just didn't really enjoy most of the episodes. They had interesting ideas in them, but I think most of them just didn't work for me.
What?
All right.
Can I interject? What was this show? I watched episode 1, and they were talking about a witch, and
Yes.
what?
Mobile game app.
Oh shit.
No. It's just what is this? Yes, that's a valid question that doesn't really have an answer.
Oh.
The show, the basic structure of the show, at the very least, is we have our blank, faceless protagonist Haruto, and he can crawl into other people's dreams and deal with their emotional problems. Which, in this show, all the various girls' emotional problems manifest in a sort of power fantasy in their dreams, in which they are a witch in this world, which has powers, and in their dreams they can do whatever they want, and it always ends up tying back into whatever their troubles are in real life. And then they use that with various directors to. I actually really like the basic structure of the show. It speaks to me a lot. I think I'm just a sucker for these sorts of shows, but yeah, it's questionable. Go ahead, Thorga.
Yeah, so sorry, my Discord was lagging. I watched 18F in its entirety, and I really hate 18F. So you already explained the concept, so I'm not gonna do that. So the point is, the first 10 episodes are like devoted to the structure of the protagonist dealing with each individual witch, and the last 3 episodes, I think, were devoted to have some, well, kind of conclusive end that tied all of them together. And so on one hand, I disliked most of the individual episodes, if not all. Each of them is supposed to deal with a character and their problems, like the witches, and how the protagonist visits them in their dreams. The main problem is that the problem of each of these characters is mostly just presented to us at the very beginning of the episode, like in a 3-minute sequence, and we're basically just presented with not a character but with a conflict, and then the rest of the episode is just spent revolving around the stretched out version of resolving those problems through the protagonist engaging with a witch. But even that doesn't fails in some contexts. Like, not only is it always stretched out and is really repetitive because there isn't much conflict to handle, because we only have one conflict and the rest of the character is non-existent, but in some cases it doesn't even get resolved, or the main character doesn't even do anything. It's not like some characters don't even have their arcs resolved. So much I remember, I think episode 4 was just literally ended with a statement, "That's how it is and you can't change it." So the individual character arcs are really weak in my perception. The presentation of the show is just really lacking in substance in any regard. But the bigger problem I have with the show is, for one thing, the main character, because not only doesn't he have any motivation or character to do what he does, he also changes his personality like every couple of episodes for no reasons and in a really inconsistent way. But the biggest problem I have with the show is the overarching plot the show tries to establish, because we're dealing with the dream worlds, and those not only serve a purpose as to present a structure in which the individual arcs can happen, but they also have relevance in the overall context. But so in the first episode, you not only have the first character arc, but you also learn something about the dream world that is given to you. And I kid you not, every single bit of information about the dream vault or the dreams or the witch's function that is given to you in their first episode will be contradicted by the show itself at one later point in the show, because it is because the only thing the show is consequent in is being inconsequent. Nothing in the show functions like it should. Everything that they say is literally contradicted about how that works and how it doesn't. And by the end, when we get over the individual arcs, which are already questionable in their own right, like one episode is devoted to being literally nothing in its substance, another episode is devoted to being really edgy, and well, I'm not gonna get over all the individual episodes, but by the end of the meta plot, we have characters getting random powers for random reasons, random illogical stuff happens that is not conclusive. The show introduces elements just to disregard them, picks up plot elements that were foreshadowed earlier, but just then throws them away again because they don't have any reason to use them. the show doesn't understand its own meta world that they establish, and by the end, when we have a protagonist that is faced in the last episode, they confront the antagonist in a really questionable way, which I'm not going to comment, so I'm just going to leave it at watch episode 13 without context.
You mentioned the I thought that was one of the few really good things, especially the finale did, was in how it approached the final antagonists there, and how they I guess you could say subdued her.
The final episode was glorious.
It's
the only episode I watched to completion, but like
it's very illogical, and I agree in how it works, and I think it misses its own point in as much as what it's trying to say, because spoilers anyways, what ends up happening in the final episode is, instead of there being a final battle of any sorts, the main protagonist dude is shooed off, and all the witches come back that he helped before and end up talking down and essentially having a therapy session for the final witch, which I thought was a really actually cool way to end the show, in as much that it moved the priority off the random dude who has no purpose in the show, and actually is about, various survivors of their traumas, coming together and building a sort of sorority for the final lady, so she could come to deal with it. But it's all under there's a lot of weird feminist commentary that doesn't really work in the context of like, at one point they'll say, like, oh yeah, men don't there are slaves in the real world nowadays, and they listen to our beck and call. But then you think about, oh hey, all these witches are here specifically because they were looking for the protagonist, right? And it keeps swinging back and forth, and it just becomes really weird and questionable in how it's executed, and doesn't really understand the point.
So I enjoyed watching the series, although I can't say that it's hard to say it's good, but it was definitely an interesting watch. And I think the structural thing where the different directors get involved for each of the different episodes, and kind of the overall like nature of that, has a pretty profound impact on kind of the end result. Like, I almost feel like anything you derive from it as like a series is actually seeing order and chaos, because I think the inconsistencies that are so common in the series are a direct result of the different people who made each of the different episodes. Interesting case study in how much influence like an individual director or whatever can have on like the particular like series or episodes they have. That's why like the tone has such dramatic shifts. That's why certain things contradict other things. That's why suddenly they bring in feminist plot elements in some episodes, and others they just kind of let that all lie. And it's just kind of a fascinating thing to watch more than anything.
I think most of the episodes all have the same writer, except for one.
Yeah, but it doesn't necessarily come across. So is kind of my impression of it. It may be that the writer has more control than I think it does, but like I get the impression that the dramatic differences are.
One final remark I wanted to make is that the show is visually, especially in the later half, absolutely horrible to look at. You can't even look at it. By episode 10, they use CGI to draw rock backgrounds and have explosions on the level of standard Windows Movie Maker effects, and every second facial expression that the characters make is fundamentally off and just weirdly drawn, and it's really hard to look at it because it's just so off.
I think I'm actually sold on watching the rest of this show now.
Speaking personally, I don't think you should. I think you should watch episodes 2, 3, 7, 8, and 10, and not watch any of the rest, because I think those are the ones that are either really good or have merit, and one could think they're good. The rest,
2, 3, 7, 8, 10.
yes.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have anything to say on the show? Because I think we've spent a fair bit of time here.
Well, I would have a question because both you and Jen mentioned that you liked episode 7. So I didn't. What specifically did you like about that episode, and especially what did you like about the episode? What was not in the other episodes?
Speaking personally, I that was one of the ones that I only added because I think a lot of other people, both here and on other servers that I've talked to, said that they loved. I did not like it because it didn't fit the structure of the show at all. But Jean?
I thought it was more interesting visually, and I like that it didn't center around Haruto. Wasn't really interested in his character much. It being centered around Pol Pot was pretty interesting too. I guess I enjoyed the concept more than all the other episodes.
I definitely think that episode was trying to do more and executed what it was trying to do better than most. Anyways, I think we're done with 18F. I'm sure anyone listening knows by now if they're watching it. All right, the next show on this list is Neo Yokio. Are we actually discussing the show, or does it count as fall season?
It came out during the summer, and it is an anime production.
Yeah, I won't dispute that. Did anyone here watch Neo Yokio? I'm in the middle of my watch, and I actually don't want to talk about it until I finish the series. But
I mean,
Ariel, take it away.
if you don't want spoilers on this show, like,
Oh, spoilers aren't what I'm worried
Okay.
about, but I think it's one of those shows that you have to watch the full thing to really grasp what it's doing. So
it requires
I'll
a
let someone
very
else
high
talk.
IQ.
Yes, exactly. It's Rick and Morty, everyone. Anyways, I'll stop interrupting. Ariel, do you want to start?
So Jaden Smith's a very bad voice actor.
Very bad. Very bad.
To get past that, to watch the show for me, at least that was my experience. Like, I got through the first episode and I couldn't. And then I went back and I tried again. And everyone, there's other not great voice actors, but they're like acceptable, and I just sort of kind of get over it. And I still hate his voice in the context of like the thing. The like side characters actually have really good voice acting, and I think like it's supposed to be kind of this satire of the like existing sort of anime tropes. I don't necessarily know that it does well. I guess it's not just anime either. It's sort of this like weird thing from like America, and I'll point the name, Neo Yokio or whatever. It's like the Tokyo, New York kind of mashup.
Let me jump in here because I watched all 6 episodes too, and everything you said is true. Like, Jaden Smith is almost an unbelievably bad voice actor to the point where it is legitimately funny every time he delivers a line.
Yeah, go ahead.
The writing does not help 1 ounce. One of the lines, it's worth watching this show alone just for the lines that these writers came up with.
I was loving the line.
Supposed to be insufferable.
Yeah, no. Okay, he's supposed to be insufferable. I get it. Yes, it accomplishes that. But just the stuff, like I'm having trouble navigating the vortex or this between lunch and dinner, or oh my god.
Is he the only one that talks like that?
Great.
It's true. Again, you're right.
I'm too tired to work because I'm depressed. Like, great line right there.
But there's just a whole host of things. Like if you ever want to see Susan Sarandon or like these big like English voice actors just phone it in as hard as possible. Oh man, yeah, it's really bad, and there's some weird things throughout this show. Like at some points, the writing actually does make a consistent joke. Like in episode 2, they have a running gag of his suit being midnight blue and that being a big thing, and then people keep commenting on it, and it's even used in like the plot of the action, where he's like, "I can't see you. Your suit's midnight blue against the midnight blue of the sky," and there's like some real good actually like. Jaden Smith's character gets brought down in episode 4, where he's held accountable for the stupid stuff he's said and his real misogynistic views. But none of it adds up to anything whatsoever. There's no point to this show, and I don't even know what they were trying to do here. We should say this show was made entirely on the brainchild of the Vampire Weekend frontman, I think. Just
Yeah.
And out of nowhere, and there's no heart, there's no purpose. The animation looks like crap. The writing's generally terrible, except for the Toblerone jokes. And man, yeah.
What about the vaping priest?
What? Yeah, Steve Buscemi shows up as a vaping priest. Yeah, no, that's wow. Just everything about that is bad. Like him being a villain, them trying to set up this like situation where there's a magocracy. What is it? Aristocracy of mages.
Fuck. You had it right the first time.
Okay. And yeah, that like none of these work. There's like they bring in a Soviet race car driver in the last episode, and not for no reason. It's just a real abortion of a show in every way.
You could probably take the mage plot out entirely and you wouldn't miss much.
Yeah,
right, but that's a lot of the show.
Well, it's not like any of it like influences anything or any of the characters.
There was one good spot of animation I remember during the possession part, I think. Oh no, not that. Where was it? Oh, when she's reading the letters. I forgot the girl's name, but I noticed the animation in that part actually was pretty good, and that's the only scene in the entire show.
Yeah, like I said, there's the only thing that saves it from the garbage bin is there are these like brief moments of, you know, whether it's themes or like humor actually comes through a couple times, or whatever that you think, this could have been something, but overall it's nothing.
Doesn't save it. I watched the whole thing, but I wouldn't recommend it.
No, no.
All right, I think that's the word right there on the Neo Yokio. Next, we're moving on to Sagrada Reset. Let's see, I pinged Kura because I know he watched it.
Poor soul.
But I don't think he's here. If he shows up, we can maybe scoot back to it if there's time. Tzuredure Children, or Tzuredure Children, I don't... It's a 10-minute short. Did anyone watch it?
Oh my. I did, but I want to hear other people's views.
You guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I watched Tzuredure Children. I also read the manga, and I gotta say it's extremely enjoyable. Now, so one thing I want to point out for this is I think it's sort of best to really understand what exactly this is. It's not trying to be deep. It's actually trying to be about as shallow as possible, and that's the reason why it works. So the broad idea of it is that it's pretty much a whole bunch of short little stories, and it just goes through some various kind of romantic comedy kind of points you can have. And it doesn't really explore anything in depth. It sort of just goes through, has multiple different couples throughout, and it just gives you sort of like the highlights of it. So really, it's just, I guess the best way to put it is that it's distilled rom-com. And so if you enjoy it, you're going to enjoy it extremely, just because it pretty much takes all the best parts and just throws it at you and you don't get dragged down by everything else. Now, on the flip side, what it really means that there's nothing really deep there. There's nothing to really like look at critically and all that stuff. It's the essence of the genre that you love to watch, and it just puts it all together for you. And that's something that I really appreciate. The only thing I find a little bit I dislike about it is just how it keeps on jumping from point to point, and there could be some characters you don't see for a long time, and it feels like. And I remember that especially in the manga, that's an issue where sometimes once it keeps on going, it's hard to track who everything is and everything that's happened before. But like each scene is worthwhile and is usually filled with just amazing moments.
All right, all right. Does anyone else want to chime in?
I want to hear what Kura has to say.
Yes.
Oh, I just wanted to hear what other people had to say.
Oh. Wow,
Oh,
after all that?
I'll talk about it if you don't want to.
I mean, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, if you want to... Actually, you can go ahead. I was going to say, if you want me to talk about it, I can talk about it at
Please,
all.
go ahead.
I didn't have my Discord open, so I didn't know who was just talking before me. But the point that I would like to make in addition to that is, although he said that if you find it enjoyable, you will find it very enjoyable, I kind of had a love-hate relationship with it. A lot of the skits were, like he said, very enjoyable. They were very funny, were very clever, very cute. And on the flip side, they had just the most insufferable, dumbest miscommunication, herder, I'm autistic and I don't know how to speak scenes. And they try to put a spin on that. So that was funny, but I really didn't find it funny. It was just infuriating. So I would find myself watching these 10-minute episodes where, like, for 5 minutes, I'd be having the time of my life. I'm like, yo, give me more. And then the next 5 minutes, I'm like, why am I watching this? I want to drop this. This is, like, awful. Like, it wasn't even like, this is mediocre. Like, it was awful. Like, make me tear my hair out awful. So.
Okay. Yeah, I want to respond to that.
Well, would I be able to say something, or you want to take
Yeah,
it?
go ahead. Go ahead.
So you know what? Like, I definitely have to agree with that, but I also have to say, I would counter that that's basically what the entire genre is, and so there's a whole bunch of miscommunication because that's how a lot of rom-coms go. Thankfully, that's not all the groups, and I would say I think the majority of the couples don't have that problem, or even if they do, it gets solved quickly. But again, like I have to go back and say like that's just part of the genre, and it just again, it tries to do the best it can for that aspect of the genre.
Right,
Okay.
or to some extent, like this is an incredibly accurate depiction of people in high school, and I don't know what your high school experiences were like, but that was 100% what mine were. Those stupid miscommunications, or thinking that she thinks something else, but she's also thinking that he's, those back and forth, and that's the essence of the not only the comedy, but what makes it a meaningful show is that it adequately or accurately captures what goes on in a high schooler's brain.
I want to counter that by saying that if you want to have an accurate description or a realistic description, or like you want to make the point that, like this is the essence of what romantic comedy does, like misunderstandings, then you can't make it a short and like purposefully shallow, like I think it was Fatians was saying, because if the very common complaint about the genre is just like melodrama or like unneeded drama. If these things were set up by like more in-depth characters or character situations or backstories, and Kai, I know you don't like Origairu, but that would be like an example of a show. It's like where characters are set up to be like more in depth and like very complex in the way that they interact with people, then said drama, like it's more palatable, or like it might even be likable for some people. But like the case where like none of that is set up is it's not that interesting. Like
I get your point 100%.
You're saying
and
that
completely.
In real life this could be your experience, but like although I didn't really have that much experience with just like random people being autistic and not being able to say what's on their mind to some extent, it's like I don't know, like I don't think that even if you had those experiences, you would kind of want to live through it again, if you know what I mean. Like it's just, I don't know, like I don't see nostalgia being a valid like
Oh.
argument in this case for this particular show.
Yeah, no, I absolutely understand. It is a sketch comedy. It is Nichijou-esque in its comedy of not overstaying any one joke more than it needs to. And then, yeah, there's a disconnect there of we're supposed to build relationships with these people with only seeing them in an ensemble cast in a short once every, for 2 minutes every other episode. So,
Yeah, but I
but-
got to say that it's important to recognize that this is a romantic comedy and like it's supposed to be funny. It's not a romantic drama, even though those series tend to be closely tied. I think what part of the issue is like you have to sort of make sure that you actually acknowledge
That-
what exactly this is, and it's supposed to be something I would say a little bit more specific. But I'm a sucker for it, and like those jokes are just hilarious. Like it's
right. I want to.
I was smiling and laughing every episode.
Yes, that I was definitely going to lead into the fact that like if you want that other thing, there's Scum's Wish and there's Skiga Kire that aired this year that absolutely did that 100% and went that route, and this kind of went a different way in being a comedy and an ensemble comedy and a sketch comedy.
So what I'm getting from this, from what you guys are saying, is that it's a show that really works on how relatable you find the humor, almost.
Kinda. Another complaint I would have about the scenes I didn't like is that like it's not that, like, oh, this is awful because of reason A, and then scene B is awful because of reason B. They just felt all awful in the exact same way, and I don't know, it just wore down on me over the seasons, so that I found myself like much of the time just kind of skipping through. Like as soon as I was like, yep, this is gonna be awful, I kind of just like sectioned through it quickly to see if I was missing anything, like starting about halfway through, and it didn't really seem like it changed much.
All right. Is there anyone who wants to have a last word on Tzuredure Children? Because I'm not sure how much there is to talk about it more.
I do want to get like a bit in here. I want to hear other people's thoughts first, and I think what Rice is saying is a bit of what I want to say, but I'd say the angle isn't that I necessarily wanted it to be more heavy, but I enjoyed the show while I was watching it. But it's been 2 weeks since I watched it, and I hardly remember anything about it. I know I laughed at the time, and to me it wasn't hilarious. It was just kind of, it was funny, it was warm, it was a cute thing. It was, it was. I think it did what it wanted it. I think it did what it wanted to do, but it didn't impress me at all in the process of it. And I'm already forgetting about it. I imagine by the end of the year, I am going to completely forget about this show. It's just sort of it was here, it was nice while it lasted, but it didn't impress me. And I think there's other shows that have done, even while staying light. They've stayed light and funny in a more memorable way. And maybe that's just what I'm looking for in media. I know a lot of people like this light, fluffy stuff, and they're not looking for it to stick with them for a longer period of time than when they're watching it. But for me, that's kind of my complaint, that it had no staying power.
All right. Okay, I think we're about done with Tzuredure Children. Kura, while you're here, did you want to talk about Sagrada Reset at all, or no?
Not really. My thoughts on Sakura Reset have changed none since the spring discussion, and I was not the person that voted for it.
Okay.
Anyways, I gotta go to the No Game No Life movie, so I'm out. Peace.
Have
See ya.
fun. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, moving on. We have Altair, A Record of Battles. Did anyone watch that or care about it at all?
I did.
Oh, take us off.
All right. I think Altair is a kind of nice show. I don't think it's a really great show or one of the best of the seasons, but I decently like it. It's I don't know how familiar you are with the premise. It's about a guy called Mahmoud, and he has a relatively high position in the fictional country that resembles Turkey, and it's about his adventures as he tries to, as he gets engaged in politics inside this world, and tries to prevent a war from happening that is about to start because there is uh, another empire that tries to invade Turkey. And I think it's a nice show in what it's doing because, for one thing, it is relatively consequential in the way it treats the main character at times. So, well, the thing is that the main character is a kind of idealist that you think. I know there was like 2 years back a series that was called The Heroic Legend of Arslan. I don't know if you're familiar with this. It is kind of similar, and both in the way that the main characters have some ideals and don't want to kill people at all and stuff. But I like in Altair that the protagonist actually doesn't get away with these idealistic views and is actually forced to kind of take action that is against his beliefs for the sake of a greater good, which is something that did not happen as much in the Heroic Legend of Arslan, respectively. And I also think the show has a very nice world building because we get, well, the main character goes on a journey throughout the show, and we get to see different countries with different people, and I think it's doing a nice show of showing the world building and showing how the different cultures engage in the politics in different ways. So I just think it depends on how much you like the actual genre that is portrayed. But I think if you like the genre, you have a good chance of ending up liking this show because it does a decent job at exploring the politics and the world behind it and guiding the main character through it.
All right, all right.
So,
Ariel?
So I read the manga. I much prefer the manga to the series, the actual animated series. I found it hard to not very watchable from my perspective. I think partly because the impetus there would be the story, and I kind of already had it, and I didn't really feel like the other technical aspects were particularly executed. So I felt like it was sort of just better to recommend people read the manga for this because I think it is a good story. Not a whole lot else there.
All right. It doesn't sound like anyone has much else to say on this, so let's move on to Boruto, the son of Naruto. Is anyone here watching Boruto?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you have stuff to say on it?
I didn't watch. I watched the original Naruto. I didn't really watch through Shippuden. So I think I'm kind of have a weird bias on that. Like I felt like it seems fairly easy to get into. Like I kind of like from the series the kind of focus on like family and kind of how things are done. And I think the Naruto team has kind of refined skills over time. Like it's not that like even you go watch the first episode of Naruto and it's quite good. But the ability to just completely cut out filler and make everything in the show meaningful because they get to just completely diverge from the actually potentially I'm hoping will allow for this series to carry on well. So far I've really enjoyed each of the arcs, particularly an arc that's about I think it's this season. There's an arc about like Sarada going and finding her parents and kind of figuring out her place in society and whether or not her mother's her real mother and all of that with some pretty solid fight at the end of that. And the themes of parenthood really kind of because like the original series does do a family as kind of a thing, but you don't really get, because Naruto himself doesn't have a father or parents, the sort of Boruto where it's, this constant between Naruto and his parents or Sarada and her parents is kind of an interesting, it's not necessarily new, but it's a much stronger focus in this show. And I think I connect a lot more with that than I did kind of in the past.
All right. Did anyone else want to talk about Boruto?
Yeah, well, I can mostly agree with Ario on Boruto because I feel about it the same way. I think it's, well, the series is technically standalone, but I think it has a really nice appeal when you watch the original Naruto, or at least parts of it. Because what I think is really nice in Boruto is the way it connects back to the original series, and this is both shown in how the new generation of kids is engaging with their parents and how the parents have changed since the original. And it's just really nice to see, for one thing, how Naruto has changed since the Naruto series and is now, and how this inflicts Boruto and defines his character. Pretty much the same goes for Sarada and Sasuke. So I think it is nice that we see the old characters again, but from a different spotlight, and how this forms the new characters. And of course, there are also completely new characters. And I also really like that the characters each have their individual personality to an extent. So I feel it actually does a decent job at having a diverse character cast that is actually characterized for the most part and does go beyond being only simple cardboard characters or something. And I also think it has a nice plot in a sense, in the way that the world did change a lot, because at the end of Naruto, a huge war happened, and after that, a time of peace started, and the world started to technologically advance at a really high rate. And this is a theme that is actually picked up a couple of times in Boruto. And I think it is really nice to see how both the world and the politics changed since Naruto, and how they now engage with it. This was both important to the antagonist of the second arc and to the third arc that we are now in, which I both liked more than the first arc, by the way, which spent the whole first core. I think that was decent, but I think starting at episode 14, 15, the show really picked up, and at the moment I'm really enjoying it for those reasons.
Absolutely.
All right, Rice. I know you popped in here, or is he just listening? All right. So would you two say you recommend it to?
How loud is this?
Oh, it's a little loud, but it works.
I mean, it's probably going to be really loud because my car's really loud. So as soon as I start driving, you'll hear it, I think.
Brought you down on the server side.
Well, I'm on Discord mobile, so I can't really do anything about that.
Ooh.
I'll probably just mute.
Yeah.
Okay.
He drives a fast car.
Yeah.
All right. Then, so would you guys recommend this to fans of the original Naruto, or what about someone who did not watch Naruto and has no interest in Naruto? Should they watch it?
So I didn't really like. I would say I wasn't a big fan of the original. I didn't hate it, but I'd say this is a good part to get in story that's like relevant to it. But I feel like if you kind of were like somewhat interested in the original Naruto, but you didn't want to like get in the middle of a series where you had to go back and watch like 200 episodes to like get caught up, this is like a good point to like jump on still.
All right.
Yeah, I think so. The original Naruto was quite long, and I did like the beginning of the original Naruto, though that might also be nostalgia, but it got worse in Shippuden, in my opinion. So anyone who liked the entirety of Naruto, I would recommend to watch Boruto, but it's enough if you've seen like the beginning of the original Naruto, like when they were a lot smaller, because I think from the way the show feels as a whole, this is much more similar to Boruto than the later parts of Shippuden, which were just a really blown up, typical action shonen show. So to those who enjoyed the beginnings of original Naruto, would definitely recommend Boruto, and to those who are not familiar with Naruto at all, I would say give it a shot, but they might be missing a bit of context or a bit of the appeal because they can't connect the stuff that is currently happening to the stuff that happened in the original.
Okay, cool. I think that's the last word there. Moving on in 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, next show is my personal anime of the season, Symphogeah EXE. But let's start with someone else. Who watched it besides me?
I did.
Puddles?
I did as well.
Kai, start us off.
Oh, you want me? Okay, all right.
Or Puddles.
I
Pick it.
mean,
Yeah, let's
Take your
let
pick.
Puddles talk.
No,
Okay.
please start it off.
All right. I don't know. Symphogear is a weird thing, right? It's very much its own thing. It's very much well informed by the state of anime nowadays. It's very much a magical girl show that is built upon the shoulders of things like Lyrical Nanoha and what came before it. And it's very much. We watched the original Symphogear as one of the so bad it's good shows, and I still think season 4 was a lot in that vein. There was some really great stuff in the first season or 2, or even 3 of Symphogear, and thematically and character-wise, there's some really not so great stuff too. But it doesn't really matter because when the characters start singing about their conflicts that they have going on, they feel passionate and meaningful. And the conflicts that they came up with in this season, not maybe as good as the other seasons, but still pretty good. I mean, Chris shoots off a kid's leg and then she has to deal with it to save his life, of course, not for any other reason. Or the one little lolly girl can't do as well at synchronizing with anyone besides her partner, and she catches a lot of shit for it. But then she learns to overcome it and, work together in the right way with the support of her teammates. And that stuff's great. That's why you should watch this show. It bummed me out that the show's still, and I don't know why I expected it to suddenly be a show that knows how to write a good villain or a good plot, but it was just not. Like,
Excuse me?
Good
Excuse
God.
me?
There's one guy, okay, so who's the bad guy? He's just naked all the time. That's like his defining characteristic, is he's just naked. And
He's the best.
that's it. Like, he's eccentric and that's it. And like then you see the 3 other evil girls, you can't see my scare quotes through the internet, but evil girls that are gonna come around to their point of view, but they have to be destroyed by the end of the season because they don't want to add them to the main cast like they did in previous seasons. So you're like, oh, I bet they're gonna sacrifice themselves, and it's very rote even in the context of Symphogear. It is more Symphogear. Maybe that's not the worst thing in the world.
I think ultimately where, and I know we've had this conversation before, but where our divide lies in as much as that you kind of see Symphogear as a show that is so bad it's good.
Mhm.
Well, I believe Petals agrees with me that it's more of a show that is so good that it's good.
I would definitely agree with that.
In as much that, like, I personally thought this was the strongest season of Symphogear that we've had yet. You can really tell that the show is starting to tie together all the various plot threads and elements that it's built up through the past 3 seasons. And the level of escalation has increased, but like it's not. It also decreased this season in as much as that the conflict was a lot more insular and personal, which is where I think the show works best. You mentioned, for example, Shirabe talking or struggling to work in unison with the other Symphogear users, and like that arc really worked out well, and it was heartfelt. I think the season personally, it lived or died by the villains who were. I mean, the 3 alchemists obviously were. Well, I say obviously, but they were great, and I love all of them. I guess that's. I'm sorry, I'm about to go on fangirl rant, so I'll pause there, and just say with Symphogear, I think there's 2 ways to look at the show, and I think both of them are actually valid, in as much as that you can see it either as like a pure spectacle show. I mean, there's all the weapons and gifs online of the show, right? Just the insane action. Or you could see the show as a very character focused show, and just how it drags in all these characters and by throwing them into these over the top situations. And I think both ways of seeing the show are equally valid. I see it in the second sense, obviously, and after 4 seasons, the girls are all so dear to my heart. I can't.
Oh yeah, those are the two ways that the show works the best, without a doubt. Like, absolutely. I I would say in the spectacle thing, there was no concert scene and nobody suplexed a space shuttle, so ah.
Yeah,
On
but she.
the other hand, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, but in the first episode they blew up a airship and oh my god, just all the action.
Yeah, but they blew up the moon before.
Right, they were going to blow up the moon again this season, but they didn't. So.
But you're right about where the heart of Symphogeah lies, and I think if you can enjoy it on those terms, then definitely watch this show.
Yeah, like I said, I think the show's way too dear to my heart to ever speak about it academically in a setting like this, especially without notes on the side. So if anyone else has anything else to say, we'll move on.
I don't know.
1, 2, 3.
Other than Cagliostro, it was absolutely fabulous and probably my favorite character of anything all year. Nope.
It's true, Cagliostro is the best. Anyways, Elegant Yokai Apartment Life. Did anyone here watch the show that I've heard described as Toho, except with boys? Go.
No, I did not.
Okay. In that, we're moving on because no one watched it. So we're going to another great, amazing, glorious show that I personally enjoyed. Kakeguri. Did anyone else here watch and finish it?
I did.
I did as well.
Okay, Kura, Puddles, Throwbot, do one of you want to start us off?
I'm still upset about the ending. I was so excited for the arc that comes next, and that.
Are you a manga reader then, Puddles?
Yeah,
or?
I read the manga, and the next arc is easily one of the strongest arcs, and easily my favorite arc. And I felt like that would have been an ending point for the series, even if it would have left things a bit more open, ambiguous, and could have left the male character on a little bit more on the sideline. I felt like that episode was really weak, but the ending was super weak. But I felt like the rest of the show did a really good job of capturing what I really liked about the manga.
All right.
Can I respond to that? It's my understanding that up until the last episode, and I guess the end of the second to last episode, it was adapting the manga, right? Could have it done the last arc in that one episode?
The rest of it was a really good adaptation. The end of episode 11 was pretty much straight from the manga until 2 lines at the end.
Okay, so my question is, the point that you wanted it to get to, it couldn't have done that in one episode, could have it?
I think it could have been. I think that arc could have gone there with how quickly it adapted how well and quickly it adapted the last couple of arcs.
Okay, I
had my doubts, but after seeing it do the last portion of the story, I feel like it would have worked. Again, I feel like the series was really good, and I'm loses out on that ending because I'm salty about that.
Kura, what did you think about the show overall?
I thought it was good. I thought it started out pretty decent. I liked it at the beginning. I thought it was fun. It was nice and edgy, but I didn't think much more of it than that at the beginning. And over the course of its run, it definitely proved to me that it had some interesting things to say about power dynamics. I don't think it was ever really saying anything too nuanced, but I think it definitely had some interesting things there. And as the arcs progressed, I think just the conflicts themselves were more interesting and more entertaining. I would agree the ending is, I wouldn't say it's bad, but I do think it's perhaps not the strongest episode in the show. I was personally satisfied with the ending, but I'm not a manga reader, so I don't know what the alternative could have been. But I thought it was a great way of, like, it's final but a bit open ended. I don't know where the manga goes from there, but I feel like if they wanted to, they could take a step back and continue the story. But if Mappa wants to leave the show as it is, they could also just never come back to it, and that's fine as an ending. So if that's the purpose of that last episode, I think it did that well. And to me, I thought the final conflict was exciting, if nothing else. So
I mean, I would agree that the last episode was fine, I guess, but I feel like it really shot the male character's development kind of in the foot, because it jumped over, like, he follows a similar trajectory of development in the manga, but like it's been really slow and well built up, where this felt sudden and, well, mostly just sudden.
okay, I can see that. I don't really care about the male character. I think he's the weakest part of everything of the entire show, and I'm not really sure any amount of development would change my opinion on that.
I never thought him as particularly useful in the show.
I absolutely agree with that, and I feel like that's why the last episode really bugs me, because I feel like bringing the male character into the conflict there is substantially less interesting than adapting Tower of Doors and leaving him on the sidelines like he stays throughout the show and the series.
I see.
I saw Ariel and Thorgot popped up here. Did either of you have comments? Or Phaeton, I guess?
I just wanted to say I thought the OP was pretty cool. Having like all this other stuff, I pretty much agree with Puddle, but I just felt like that needed to be expressed.
OP is really good.
Wasn't
It
it?
was pretty great.
Wasn't it Yamoto?
Yeah, it's
Yes.
Yeah, it's just like remarkable to me, because it's rare that I see an OP that I want to actually sit through every episode.
Again, the director of the Persona 5 opening.
I downloaded the single. Very good. So
They also foreshadowed Tower of Doors in it, which makes me extra sad.
I know.
I know.
Are you a manga reader as well, then, Ariel?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm
Okay.
pretty much right there with Puddles and everything. So.
Okay. I enjoyed the show. It was really fun. I don't know how much more I have to say about it. I intend to pick up the manga at some point here. So that's just me speaking personally. If you like gambling, it's a great gambling manga. It doesn't have the darkness of Kaiji, but it has a lot of the flair of Kaiji, and that's what matters. Otherwise, does anyone have any last-minute comments?
Yeah, so I think the most appealing feature about the show is the gambling in itself, and especially because the show involves a lot of, well, cheating. And I think it's really nice how they explore the mechanisms of the, well, games they are playing, they are gambling to. And I think the most appealing feature is to see how they utilize it, or how they exploit the games they are playing to either cheat or develop some tactics. So I think that indeed the gambling is the most interesting aspect of the show, but it's also kind of interesting how some of the characters engage with the gambling by itself, though it never went too far into that. My favorite arc, especially with regards to how the game is handled, was the second last arc. I thought my second favorite after before that was the Russian roulette arc. I thought the other arcs were either decent or, especially the idol arc was kind of weak in my opinion because it couldn't really get beyond the games. But I think the gambling itself is the greatest appeal of the show. But on the other hand, especially in the mentioned last episode, it's just some kind of plot convenience thrown into the writing to get desired results, and some stakes that are continuously missing throughout the show can be a bit disappointing, but I definitely think it's an enjoyable watch.
All right. I think we're all in agreement here that it's pretty enjoyable. Anyways, let's move on to Lights of Clione, Hikari no Kion. This was a 5-minute short series. Did anyone
9
hear?
minute,
9
I
minutes.
think.
Okay. And it was some remarkably bad animation that I would say was the worst of the season if 18if didn't exist. But I only watched one episode. Did anyone here finish it?
Yes, I did.
Start us off.
Yes, so Lights of the Clione is a show about a girl who's sick and gets bullied in school continuously by all her classmates, and it's about precisely our main character and a friend of his who tried to help the girl by befriending her outside of school and doing stuff with her. And the premise is decent, I guess, but I'm really found the show unenjoyable in its execution. Well, first of all, the bullying aspect is the main part of the premise that the sick girl is getting bullied, but I feel it's really off-putting because all the bullying is entirely gratuitous and we never really see a reason for why that bullying is happening. It just or how it even developed. It's just like something that is ubiquitously accepted between all the students that this girl is getting bullied, and I couldn't really get beyond that as a premise. And nor could I get beyond the characters who were too cowardly to stand up for the girl in front of the class because they feared getting bullied themselves, so they just decided to befriend her outside of the school and do private activities with her, and then feeling good about it because even though they don't do much, or the actions they do don't amount to anything. And the worst part is I think that the whole show gets really stale because, well, there is a part about the premise that I didn't mention, but over half of the show is spent before we even arrive at the final point of the premise. And it's really repetitive. Like, I basically just, what I explained to you just now is basically the first 8 episodes of the show without anything new happening, without any deeper characterization or anything of the sort. So just the same repetitive stuff that I can't find any substance or enjoyability in. And by the end, we have some weak plot developments that are never fully explained, and by the end, the entire well, I don't want to spoil the end, but it's a really abrupt change that doesn't really feel properly embedded into the story. That's all I'm gonna say. I wouldn't really recommend watching the show.
All right. Yeah, that lines up with most of everything I've heard about the show. Did anyone else have any comments? Going. Okay, let's move on to Marvel Future Avengers. Is this a show? I've never heard of it. I guess it probably is. Did anyone here watch it?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Moving on to a show I've heard described as the clusterfuck of the season, but I also didn't watch it. Gamers. Anyone here have anything to say on it?
But I did not see this one either.
All right. We're hitting some good ones here. Chronos Ruler. Another show I did not realize aired this season.
Nope, I haven't seen it either.
Cool.
I've seen it.
Thorda, good, bad, anything to say?
Bad, pretty bad. Like Chronos Ruler is a show about some people with some superpower that allows them to accelerate the time of specific objects. Like they can they have each specific objects assigned to them, or like stuff like water or air, for example, and they can accelerate the time of that object or not. Don't question me about how much sense that it makes physically. And the show is about a father and his son, but the father is younger than his son because his time got eaten by a beast that is called a horologe that appear in the world whenever someone wishes to return time because they made a mistake, and then these horologes appear and eat the time of that person until they die, and they kind of try to regain his memories and stuff. And so it's basically a superpower show. And what I think is the worst part of the show in the first half is that every action they take is, or rather most of the plot that they revolve around is essentially completely nullified at a later point. Like they spend multiple episodes on a single conflict, and then just the next episode they go ahead and say that it actually didn't matter. So in a constant attempt to surprise the viewer, they just nullify all actions they did, and sometimes they even go as far as to have characters simply not do simple human communication that would entirely avoid a conflict just to have a conflict, and then reveal that the conflict was entirely pointless because it was not what we assumed it would be. And in other stuff, especially in the second half, which tries to make a character arc for the main character, it's really hard to get behind it, because for one thing, there is a character arc that is you can kind of get behind what the character is feeling, but the way they're portraying it is really bad, because the character is constantly acting like like he has a bipolar disorder, because there are conflicting aspects of his personality, but the show doesn't manage to correctly portray that, though it just comes off it really weird, and then it mostly repeats the same stuff for multiple episodes, and by the end they have a huge overblown fight against the final boss, in which each possible power level that was established early in the show is simply defied. And also the set horologes are pretty inconsistent in the way they are described to function. Like they say stuff about them that is this, and episodes later it's actually something different. So it's just written in a very weird and unenjoyable way that constantly takes some small leaps in logic, or kind of fucks up itself. So I don't think it's really enjoyable to watch. I think it's pretty bad, and I wouldn't recommend watching it.
Sounds about right. All right. Let's go into the show that actually is probably has some actual merit here. Princess Principal. I love the show. Who else watched it though?
I love the show as well.
I love the show as well. Well, kind of.
I think I'm the only one who disliked it.
Okay, let's start off with Kai, and then we'll let Thor give his rebuttal.
All right, cool. I was real hyped on this show early in the season, and I think it generally it showed exactly what I was coming into the show for. It's the setup is there's bring it up here, a set of spies, and in a like kind of fantasy steampunk London that has a Berlin Wall situation going on. The setting's mostly just in the background. What's real cool about this show is that they use the concept of spies to talk about characters opening up and making themselves vulnerable to each other. We follow this group of girls, and they go through different missions that force them in different ways to confront the fact that being a spy means shutting yourself off, and deception, and guarding against any possible, vulnerability, but then also make it a group of girls and friends that do establish the bonds that would allow them to be vulnerable. The show works best episodically, that you could take any of these episodes and pull it out and say, well, this is examining this character in this type of situation. Those have varying degrees of success. The laundry episode is kind of meh, but then...
I thought that was the best episode.
I agree.
Okay. All right. Maybe I'm crazy. But then I thought when you see Anjay and the princess and their backstory in episode 8 and the following episode, I thought that was like amazing storytelling, and I was totally in on it. That said, I Princess Principal had a lot going for it. Great opening, great production values on a lot of the show. Real cool concept and good voice acting. And then I don't think it all came together very well to be any type of coherent plot near the end. So I really liked it. I think I gave it an 8 out of 10, and just let down by some kind of poor series composition or like writing near the end.
All right. So first of all, I think I especially agree with the last point you made. I think there are different aspects to the show that the show is attempting to be, and I think it kind of doesn't manage to properly settle on one of these points or sees it through to the end, nor to combine them. For one thing, the show is trying to be a spy show, and on the other end, it's trying to be episodic in terms of a spy show. But then it tries to have an overarching narrative, and at the same time, it tries to be a character drama at times. So I'll try to address these one after another. So first of all, as a spy show, the show is absolutely bad. The spy work the characters are occasionally portrayed doing is completely sloppy. So you can hear them talking at unreasonable times. You can hear them making too loud footsteps, and basically every second trick they use to get past guard is to let one character, Dorothy was her name, impress some male guards with her boobs, and that is solving every conflict because there is no guard that is able to withstand the Deus Ex Machina that Dorothy's boobs are. And the spy work as a whole is really, really sloppy, I think. And it's mostly really cliched as well. Like there is nothing original or reasonable about the spy work. It's just the most usual tropes that you will ever encounter in the genre that are try to make it seem like they would actually function. So, and the next part is the overarching narrative of the show that I think felt pretty flat. I mean, Ka mostly agreed with that because they try to have individual arcs, and each of these individual arcs introduces individual elements. Some focus more on what the world is about, some focus more on the individual characters, and they introduce different plot elements, and by the end, they can't really see through anything of what they introduced earlier, like some aspects, and just throw in a completely new plot out of nowhere, a new plot element, to just kind of try to tie things up, and it doesn't really work well in the way it is really surprising in the way it comes, and it disregards most of the stuff that was brought up further. Like one thing that is probably the best example of this is the Japanese people or the Japanese government. They tried to make to have some kind of political role, but that are just basically written off by the end. It just tries to get some conclusion, but that isn't really satisfying in any regards. So the part that I disagree with probably with Kai is the way the characters are. Kai said that it uses the spies to portray how the characters are opening up, and I can generally see that, but I think that was actually one of the most off-putting aspects in the early episodes of the series, because the series is so open and blatant with this, because they didn't try to use this as a subtle theme. Instead, we hear in the first episode hearing the word lie literally once every minute, and it seemed really off-putting to me when basically everything was framed to be a lie. I'm glad that the series tuned down on that later, but it just seemed to try to be way too blatant with that theme. In general, I think the characterization mostly doesn't work, because whenever we get to parts like that, it's just some really forced family drama that relies either on victimization or on writing characters that are really inconsistent in their actions just to get some kind of drama out of it. And I think it doesn't really work well. I think the best example for this is the Morgue episode, which I think was episode 6, where we have a character that is like changes personality at multiple points in time just to get most drama as possible out of the series. And I think it's really weak in the way the characters are done, because we don't get to actual character arcs, we just get to drama for the sake of drama, and that is mostly presented through abusive fathers. And I think it's not really creative or well executed in that regard.
You mentioned episode 6 specifically, and I after episode 7, which was the laundry episode, I thought episode 6 was actually the strongest episode personally, besides episode 7. And I mean, obviously, I tend to lean more with what Kai was saying. It's sounding that a lot of the issues you had with the show perhaps were more structural and how it took the setting really lightly, as opposed to I feel. Would you agree or disagree with that, or?
Yeah, I think that kind of is the problem. I don't like the way they try to use that spice theme, or in general the premise they had, and to try to make a coherent plot out of it. And I also don't think it mixed well. That I forgot to address that I don't think it's a good idea to make a show that attempts to be serious, at least in its themes. At least I had the impression that it was trying to be serious, but at the same time it tried to introduce the lolly ninja character. It's something that doesn't really work in my eyes, and it's neither like it was a really intentional choice to create some kind of juxtaposition. It just felt really off to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree mostly.
Wasn't this the Code Geass writer?
Yes.
And Valve Rave.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it has those types of things where it's kind of like, and enjoying the show for the. Go ahead.
So actually, I have something to say about this. So I'm gonna have to keep my comments to this anime limited. I've only watched the first 2 episodes, but from what I saw in those first 2 episodes, it basically committed some like the biggest sins you can ever commit in terms of like any mystery or any kind of suspense kind of writing. And the main reason is that the only way the show seemed to be able to build suspense was by just not giving the audience any means to even figure it out themselves. And so in both situations, you get put in these crazy like cyberpunk spy things are going on. And then all of a sudden like characters do all this crazy stuff like, whoa, what's going on? And then the end of it's revealed, oh, well, off camera, I did something that none of you guys would have any access, like you have no access to this information. And then I figured something out. And that's why I acted in this completely crazy way that made no sense, but turned out to be
Can I interject here, Peyton?
And so, well, and the key is this is just a personal point. And then when it looks to, from what I've heard about Kai talking about it, the character interactions, I could definitely understand how that could be a selling point once it gets established, because it does seem like there's interesting characters, and I could definitely see that be worthwhile. Again, it runs into the sort of larger issue of, I mean, what's the point of having this setting if the character interactions, like what really makes the anime worthwhile, is something that's completely divorced from what makes the anime unique.
Yeah, it's
And-
not a
Okay,
mystery
so
show. It's not a thriller at all.
I actually didn't like the show, but I also disagree with that argument.
Yeah.
Because a lot of anime do that. They divorce the setting from the whole character. Like whoever's read the whole database animals thing, like that's like sort of what it's talking about. By what's his name? Azuma. There's a book, Otaku Database Animals, that we read a while ago. Some of us did, and it talks about that kind of stuff, where you divorce, like you have the setting as flavor, and then it's actually focused on the characters. And I can see that the argument that this show does that, but I also don't think the characters are very good. So that's my main complaint. But I also don't. So I don't like the show, but I also don't think that argument is completely fair. But I do get the preference there. I don't think that's what the show is going for, though.
Yeah, I disagree on your interpretation of database animals, but that's getting to a different discussion. But I'll just say that I disagree with that, but I'm not going to respond further.
I think my problem is that it failed at both fronts, like both the settings and the characters neither convinced me, and nor did they play together, and I think that is what makes the main issue I had with the show.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think I probably have the most positive opinion of the show of anyone here. In as much that I was really able to buy into these characters and their troubles.
I also
Yeah.
felt the characters were compelling.
Me too.
I would say at points that they did feel a little one note, especially nearing the end. In as much that I think the ninja, the lowly ninja assassin in particular, just there was very little to her actual character.
Yeah.
And that got in the way of making it a true like masterpiece, I would say. But it was really competent in my eyes, getting you to empathize and understanding how people deal with trauma and interact with each other, and just how all these various different. It just really worked for me, at least. I'm sorry, I'm not the greatest at that.
I mean, with things like being able to relate, that's like something less, tenuous or
Yeah,
it's harder to explain,
More personal.
So it's understandable.
and I do think this is a show that if you don't buy into the characters really a lot, then you're not going to have as good of a time.
Right. Yeah.
So for me, it's not that I didn't buy into the characters. I just thought they were kind of like you said, they were one note, and I have seen this before. That kind of feeling, and I didn't think it was a bad show. I think it did a lot of things competently. I just don't think it ever went beyond just like regular competence.
Go ahead, Thogat.
I just want to say I definitely think that you can enjoy the show if you are able to empathize with the characters. I think it's easier for you to not be bothered by the way the plot plays out. So you can definitely see that. But in my case, it just didn't work, and in that case, I don't think the series has many merits.
All right.
Yeah. Can I get the final word on that show?
Shoot.
No.
You got something else to say?
Or Puddles?
Can I mention the kick-ass OP?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Definitely.
The whole
The
soundtrack.
song
It's
is
Yuki
great.
Tajira.
The
It's
sound-
great.
The soundtrack was really good.
Yeah.
I have a couple points, but they're not super important, so if we just need to move on. That's fine.
No,
Okay.
we're actually ahead of schedule.
Okay. So, first point, the like putting episode 10 first and then going to 1.
Oh yeah, it's out of order.
Fine.
All the episodes.
Yeah. For my engagement in the show, not really to like care about anything. I basically have to see like, it's like I genuinely watched the like first aired episode, and I just hated it. Or not hated it, but like I couldn't. That's not the word for it. I couldn't get into it at all. It was not great. And then someone was like, well, there's some plot in the next one. And so I watched that, and I actually found I really liked the series as a result, which they structurally it was fine the way they kind of had it together from like 1 through. Just they decided to try to put this like action-y part first, and it did not work for me at all, and it almost made me just not watch the series, and that's shitty.
I think the action overall was very much the lesser aspect of the show, and I also do think the non-linear narrative did not really add anything to the overall structure.
Yeah.
Otherwise, Kai or Puddles, if you guys had any last words.
I mean, I don't think I would have kept watching if episode 2 had been episode 1. Episode 1 sold me real hard in the series.
Yeah, and they actually never. If I'm correct.
Just final scene.
Sorry, I don't know if I might your neck out there.
It's all good.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Kara.
Oh, I think Thorgot was the one making the complaints against the show, and I feel like he interpreted it as a spy show, which isn't exact. I don't agree with Kai or Thorgot's really take on it. I'm closer to Thorgot's. I don't really think it's a spy show, but like a rule of cool spy show. I don't think it ever was really good at taking itself that seriously. And for me, the first couple episodes were definitely the most exciting because I thought it was ridiculous, and I don't think that was bad. I don't think the Lolly Ninja character was destroying the show. I certainly wasn't a big fan of her, but it kind of fit this rule of cool atmosphere I think it set up, and it was doing decently well with that. Although when it slowed down and started doing the more slice of life stuff, I think it definitely veered off that course. And I'd say I'd stopped enjoying the show at that point. The ending was not very good, but I'd say at the end it was actually better than the middle. I never really liked any of the slice of life stuff, but I guess that's just like another take on it. I don't think it was a serious spy show. It was Rule of Cool.
Yeah, I think I agree.
I would agree
Yeah.
with that as well.
Yeah, I can see that as rule of cool, but I think it was actually trying to be a serious show when it like got to the character arcs. I think that was supposed to be a serious part, even if the spy part was only rule of cool. And in that case, I don't think the atmosphere was very consistent. But either way, I don't think the sole aspects of the show really play together to create a good whole. And I think that's my main problem.
All right. I think we can probably continue on with
All
this discussion, but we need to start moving along. Is your internet okay, Kai?
Yeah, no, yeah. I had
Okay,
a moment
last
where I lapsed
comment
there. Yeah, I just want to say that I appreciate Studio 3 Hertz, the studio that does this. They're a studio founded on the idea of making original anime, and sometimes they have to pay the bills and they don't get the chance. But this was one of the shots where they were like, let's do something out there. And in the same way I appreciate Studio Trigger, I appreciated this type of thing. It was a risk.
I don't think this was a risk. They're making a mobile game for it.
Yeah.
Also, they have made like some pretty bad shit in the past. So
listen, I'm not saying like that gives it a pass on being the things it did poorly. I'm saying it was different enough from what we usually get that I appreciated that.
okay, well, I like I was saying before, like I felt this was really not different. I thought this was like stuff we've seen before so many times. So I would completely disagree there.
They just need to keep making shows about gay girls, and they'll be good.
Yeah, just make more
Agreed.
flip flappers, honestly.
Well, that's what this was, and it was pretty good. So
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
nowhere near as incredible, obviously. But anyways, I think it's time to move on from Princess Principal. I think maybe a tenuous, positive recommendation from us. Definitely go into it guarded, though. Our next show we're going to talk about is In a Different World with My Smartphone.
Oh boy.
Does anyone even want to talk about this show?
So we want to keep this short. I'm just going to say it sucks and don't watch it.
All right, that's the word. Owarimonogatari. I know this is going to be a long one.
Well, probably
Have
not
fun.
if we're not talking about spoilers. So
Okay.
I don't think that many people watched it because I don't know how many people are that far into the series.
I mean,
I did.
I
did.
actually dropped it.
Like you dropped Monogatari, or you dropped Owarimonogatari too?
I dropped Owarimonogatari season 2 because I found it insufferable compared to most of the stuff that's come before this. I don't really know how to explain it. It's just like I feel like it was starting to wrap up and like having an ending. Just I didn't care anymore.
You know, this series is never gonna die, right?
Well, that is the ending of the main overarching thing with Araragi, but they do have he's gonna keep writing in that universe, obviously. But I
There's-
thought
They
it
already
was
published
really
stuff where he's in
good.
college.
Yeah, I know. He's got like 4 other sequels already, but we're talking about the show right now. So
I also think my tastes have changed quite a bit since I watched the first part, and I don't think my opinion would be as positive anymore either. So that's probably also part of it.
yeah, we're doing a rewatch right now, and I think most of us like it more on rewatch. So that's interesting. Anyways, I thought it was really good. I was kind of losing faith in Nisio with the last few seasons after second season, starting with like Tsuki and then Owari. And I wasn't really sure where he was trying to go with that, but this I think wrapped it all up, and I was really impressed by the way he tied everything together and ended it like with the themes that were in all the way back in Kizu and Bake. So that was really nice.
Yeah, I agree for the most part. Like, we can't say much because it's spoilers, but I really like the way, for one thing, how it wrapped up the, well, plot, though the plot was mostly only secondary in the series. I think it did a really well job of tying this together, but the stuff I appreciate the most is how it also closed the individual character arcs off. Like, we get the closure on each arc, especially on Araragi's arc, and I think it's just a nice way to close the series and a good bit of final development for especially him, but also some relationships with other characters.
Question:
Yeah.
Do we get more Kanbaru?
Not really, because Kanbaru's is handled in Hana Monogatari,
Yeah.
which is chronologically playing even after.
Yeah, that it's
I recall
the
correctly.
very last thing in the series. So,
Yeah. And I'm also really curious because there's another season of novels with new stuff, but also in this novel season, well, that this was adapted from, there's one more novel.
Yeah, there's one more volume.
Yeah, which is Zoku Owarimonogatari, and I hope it gets animated. It's the only thing missing until we have the first 3 seasons of the volumes novels completely adapted.
I don't think Shaft's ever gonna stop, so no worries there from me. Hopefully, at least.
I'm
yeah.
curious what else there will be addressed, because the new season of novels will be like a new start and new side stories, but I'm curious if there is actually something to the main plot that is still going on in Zoku Ovari, or if it's just a kind of epilogue or something.
From what I heard, I think it's mostly epilogue stuff. Like, the whole thing is mostly wrapped up in terms of character, and then the stuff after Zoku Owari is like different characters, not the main core cast. Or it might follow like the younger characters or something, or their classmates.
All right.
But yeah, anyways, I really liked how it wrapped up everything that was set up, like from Kizu even, like, because if you've watched Kizu, like, it sort of resolves at this stalemate, and then Owari finally sort of resolves all that, like, what, 70 episodes later. So that was really, I really appreciated that, and so yeah, I'm like 3 or 4 for 4 for Nisio works, or like 3 for 3 or something like that. So definitely like his writing. Definitely not for everyone, but also really, really good stuff.
All right.
Have you been reading his books?
I read Kizu.
Because I definitely recommend reading through Bakemonogatari. It's interesting
yeah,
because
I've heard you talk about it before.
Yeah, I'm just amazed at how the writing, how the anime is done extremely well, but there's a whole lot more to the books than the anime can actually cover.
Well, going from Kizu to the movies, I would say, I think, and since they have the same director as Bake, I think I trust Oishi completely.
I would say, well, I
100% faith.
I haven't seen the movie, but since the movie has 3 feature-length episodes to cover something that most books were covered in 2 episodes, I mean, you could definitely do a better job. So I think Kize is the exception, not the rule.
No, I mean, I meant in the sense of he saw this book that was almost like 95% monologues and cut out all of the monologues and still made the movies somehow better than the books. So I have complete faith that he did a good job with Bake without reading it. But I might read him in the future. I don't feel like it because I don't like rereading and rewatching things that I've already done. So, but
I would just say
think
the
we're
characters
getting
are
a little
different.
off topic.
That's the big thing.
Yeah, definitely off topic.
So I'm gonna ask you guys to wrap up this.
I think Kura watched it too. If he wants to say anything.
Yeah, I did watch it, but I think most of what you said was most of what Al said is also represents my feelings. I thought it was great, great conclusion to the series, and yeah, I mean that's about it. I think most of if we're not really gonna dive too deep into spoilers, then most of this conversation could be saved for when the club gets to ORI 2. And I encourage anyone who's here and not in the Monogatari Club to consider jumping in with us. Our next discussion is going to be about the Kizu movies, and then we'll be moving into Nisei Monogatari. So if anyone wants to talk about Monogatari, join the rewatch.
That's a call to all of you people. I'm glad it was a good show. I'm not caught up or anything, so I don't have anything to add. Unless if there's any last comments, I'm ready to move on. 1, 2, 3. Nope. Okay. Next show is New Game Season 2. Did anyone watch this?
I think Jiggles did.
Oh, he's not here, so
Wait, I think Rice did. He's not here anymore? Okay.
he said he was watching No Game No Life, the movie. All right, moving
I
on.
expect it to be the same as before, so.
Yeah, that is what more or less what I've heard from my friends who watched it. It's more New Game.
New game or no game, no life? Okay.
You said New Game
New
No Life.
game, new life.
Nice Freudian slip.
Question: would those two shows combined, be better?
You know, probably not. I think. I can't think of many things that would be better if you added No Game No Life to it. So.
I was
Anyways,
thinking about replacing No Game No Life's cast with new games. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry, off topic.
yes. Okay, next show was kind of a unspoken power horse this season, and sadly, Reality Rush isn't here, so we can't
Should
go
ping him.
deep in it. Probably for the best, though. Sakura Quest. I finished it. Did anyone else?
I've been watching the dub, so I'm a couple episodes behind, but I've been greatly enjoying it.
All right, Ariel or Phaeton, do you want to start us off on?
So I think it takes a sort of I feel like it deliberately takes like the most boring possible premise, where like it's like tourism for a place no one wants to go to, and then does a lot of like character stuff with it, and that's pretty fascinating. Like it's basically heavily of kind of this sort of growing genre of like, you know, instead of, or at least what I feel like is like, instead of doing like the high school thing, you know, with like the inevitable end of high school or whatever in it, instead it's now girls in the workforce, which is cool to see. And it you know, and that always is based on interactions between the characters and more than it's about like what's actually going on for the most part in the series. You know, like some of them are fairly interesting, kind of like story wise, I guess, but this one really seems to go hard on. It's enjoyable, I think, for that aspect more than anything else.
Phaeton or Rush, now that Rush is here? What are your thoughts on Sakura Quest?
Okay, you can hear me first off, right?
Yes.
Okay. My one thing I just wanted to mention and why I kind of wanted to be pinged about it is the one strength I really wanted to mention about it is partially because everyone kept comparing it to Shirobako, which I wouldn't directly. I think they're dissimilar enough. But the main point I wanted to make was that one thing about Sakura Quest that I personally really liked, and it seems to be a common thing that PA Works seems to do well, is that I think it does a very good job of handling a very large cast. In the sense that you get to know most of them. They all feel like people with their own personalities, their own issues, and they all kind of do their own little individual job of making the whole town, the whole show feel a lot more lively and lived in. Because you have a lot of slice of life shows where you'll kind of follow a few people along and they'll kind of do like the flying witch thing or whatever, try to make you happy or just show you some small aspect of life. Whereas Sakura Quest really tries to bring out that kind of grander here's a whole community living life type thing, which I think is something that Shirobako did well, and I think something that you can compare the two of them with that was done quite successfully. So because of that, and because I think the characters themselves, for the most part, in the main cast, were fairly interesting. I think they all had very relatable, if maybe a bit eccentric and over the top because it's anime issues. I think it really, at least personally, I found it easy to kind of just fall into the show and either like even insert myself in some of those positions or just really kind of relate and think about how they affect my own life. And I think that did a lot to make the show more appealing for me. Whereas something like Shirobako, which was also my favorite show ever, was great, but I don't think Shirobako did as good of a job making it relatable to like my own life. It just kind of presented like a rose-tinted, super optimistic and kind of energetic look at working life in an anime. So that's kind of my take on it and what I wanted to talk about.
All right. So I think one thing that's important to say is that, I mean, I definitely enjoy this anime. I actually think this might be one of my picks for anime of the year. I liked it that much. However, I haven't seen Shirobako, and so I can't really talk about the similarities or dissimilarities. However, I think what Sakura Quest is able to achieve is probably something a little bit better than what Shirobako can do, just because of the various settings. But again, like I don't have any way to prove that claim. So the one thing I really want to say about Sakura Quest, which I think makes it work so well, is that it is an amazingly grounded anime. So one thing that I think is very important to recognize is that a lot of this anime is basically people just trying to deal with problems, and these problems don't have solid solutions. And so when they're trying to like revitalize the town, it always comes to an issue because there is no plan that works out well. Like, well, there's no plan that works out perfectly. Some plans work out better than others, and some plans backfire. Some plans appear they do well, and then they don't really, they sort of fall apart. And then, and so I guess the best way to sum it up is that this is an anime that really captures life, especially life in adulthood and life pretty much entering the workforce, which is something someone talked about earlier. And I definitely think that this is like this show really captures a lot of those challenges, makes it endearing, and then makes it it's just something enjoyable to watch. I also want to say again, the town is extremely well done. It has a large cast of characters, and yet you actually do get to get a feel for a lot of the recurring characters. You also get opportunities to see them in multiple different aspects. No character is a cardboard cutout, in which pretty much any character you see, you'll see them in probably at least two different ways. In which, yeah, you get to see the guy who's a police officer, but then you also see that he's one of the guys who is in charge of like the big singles group. And like one of the arcs, he's basically just trying to hit on this like foreign girl, and like that's basically the entire thing. But then like in later arcs, he's a police officer. You can look at all the characters and see there's multiple different things that they do, and so you're able to get an extreme depth with the characters. And I think that's something that's extremely well done. And since I'm sort of rambling on here, I'll just sort of finish with one point, which I think is the best point about this, is that to me, I sort of feel like an anime is best when the anime actually does something. And I think what this does is that this anime is trying to figure out how do you move forward and be productive in life. And so a lot of the characters that you encounter are characters who really like either things have gone wrong or things just aren't going the way life has planned them to. And so they're all young women, but they're all women who are in a point in their lives where things really aren't going the way they want them to. And this is a good sort of look into trying to figure out how do you improve yourself? How do you make something of yourself? Which is something I think is a lot more useful for people, especially the anime community at large. And I think it's also a good thing for a story to really explore, is just how do you make your life better, and how do you be a better person, and how do you help your community? And that's just something I find extremely endearing, and I think the anime does a really good job with it. All right, well, that's it.
I actually want to add on to that. I love the show really a lot, and I think it's a very contemporary show in a lot of ways, which added on to why I liked it so much. In as much that, to use the dreaded phrases, this is a very millennial sort of show. All the characters, and I liked how much it took on the thing about all the main characters at the very least are people who've failed in their other jobs and other ventures in life, and the whole show is about coming out of that failure and finding something within themselves that they can feel good about and become better overall as people in as much. And that really sold me on the show a lot. I mean, I think there's definitely an element of relatability that you would need to have for the show overall, but just it takes a sort of interesting take on a topic, and the way it plays the realism is just really brilliant. I agree with everything Faden and Rush said, which is surprising, but
I have one more thing to add to actually as well on to Faden's point, and Contessa even. Both of you mentioned the one of the other aspects of the show where it likes to comment on, like, what do you do when you don't succeed? I kind of forgot to mention that too, that is something else that did also really sell me, because a lot of shows, and again, I'll harken back to even like Shirabaku, or even like Hanasaku Aroha, or like any of the other PUA Works shows, or a lot of anime, they often deal with the issue of like, okay, here's a problem. How do I get from A to B, get to B? There's the solution. Yeah, everyone's happy. But Sakura Quest is one of few shows that at least stands out in my mind where a lot of the time, most of the time even, their like main objective was almost failed. Like they had, at least as they perceived it in their mind, they thought it was a failure. Like their goal is, okay, we need to make this town bigger, more important, bigger, get people here. They didn't necessarily do that, but as Faden also pointed out, what was important to them was finding a way in life to succeed for themselves, if not that like outward, just kind of stationary objective. Like every time something changed for them, they had to kind of reframe their outlook and figure out, okay, how did this make me better? How do I make do with whatever this situation has given me? And I think that is something that I don't see enough of, or maybe I'm just not watching enough shows that do that. But I really, really appreciated that in the show, that it wasn't necessary to just get from point A to B. It went from point A to just all over the place to eventually somewhere where they just kind of found happiness in whatever way they could. And like the memories of the town, and even if they didn't necessarily save it in like the contemporary sense, they saved it in that people and the culture was remembered, which was what they found was kind of important to them and the people there. So I really appreciated that it went out of its way to show that aspect more than kind of just a standard linear story type.
Yeah, I agree with most of, well, basically all what the people before me said. What I want to add to this is that I really also like the way the closer main character cast. There's a big character cast, but there is a certain main character cast, and I really like the way these characters are characterized and the way they deal with their problems. And what I especially appreciate about Sakura Quest is how it shows how they got from their previous life situations to live in this, well, relatively small and unknown town, because they all got there on some different way, and that it shows us how they got there and how they use the situation in their town, and also the problems they're dealing with in trying to revitalize the town, to reevaluate their own life and their own life choices, and actually use that to develop. And this was especially prevalent in the main character, and I think it is a really nice aspect when a show always tries to shows us how the characters engage with the subject matter and thus develop through doing that. And I think this was also handled pretty well in Sakura Quest.
So there's actually
we need to start moving on. Peyton, if you have one last thought, feel free to say.
So there's one last thought, and I think this is just another cool aspect about it, is that and I think one thing I've seen in Sakura Quest I haven't really seen in anything else is that it actually has perspective. And so in pretty much each arc will probably last maybe like 2 to 3 episodes. What will happen is that maybe one of the 5 main characters will have something that really challenges them, in which they have to deal with something they've never even had to deal with or had to think through before, or there's something that just sort of challenges like their perception of the world, the way they look at the world, and the way they fit in the world. However, that never overwhelms the story. And so it keeps it into the sense of perspective where even though that is important, there's still a whole bunch of various things going on with other people. And it's just one aspect of all the things going on in the town. And that's sort of the way that's sort of where some like the issue comes from. That sometimes you could tell like that character might want to be more important, but there are things that are really more important. I think that's actually something that's really good, is to see that even though this stuff is important, it's good to have a wider perspective, and then you have to sort of look at everything, which I think is probably one of the better ways it handles its drama, is that it has these amazing character development moments, but it does sort of happen a little bit on the side because the town is more important.
I'm gonna cut you off here because I think we need to start moving on. But sorry, Peyton. But otherwise, yeah, Sakura Quest, great show. If you like any sort of character study stuff, feel free. It's really great. Anyways, we're moving on to Fate Apocrypha, and I see Plake and Cow just showed up, and so I'll let those two carry it.
Oh boy. So if anyone's read or watched the UFO Fate adaptations, at least, the Fate Apocrypha basically takes all the themes and the trappings of Fate Stay Night, and then sort of makes a watered down version of that and adds a bunch of random extraneous stuff to it. And over underwhelming to say the least. I was expecting it to be a lot better based on the keyframes. There are some previews that they showed on Twitter or something, and they looked pretty good. And like in the actual show, it's like really muddy looking, and the it's just overall really not a good product. I don't know how much Plake has seen, but yeah, it's a mess.
I haven't seen much, but I dropped it, and I like Fate, so that should tell you maybe a lot. I feel it's like a straw man of what Fate is supposed to be.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it. It's like it's pretending to be Fate, and then being bad at it.
Yeah,
like they just have
chilly,
watered. Yeah, they have watered down version of all the characters basically.
Yeah, he just copied like the superficial aspects of it, and he kind of doesn't get what makes it work. And yeah, the animation's bad. I'm surprised animation doesn't look good because the director worked on other stuff that looks really pretty. I don't know why they chose those filters and make it all look gray and brown and shit. It's a mess. I know what happened.
Yikes. Contessa said she was.
That said, it's still like mildly fun because there's action and it's kind of well done and it's cool. Like they got the cool aspect of it, but
yeah, I mean
it's
just escalating and like random Keikaku bullshit right now, which is still fun. So I'm still only watching it because I watch Fate, so I gotta know like this stuff so I can talk about it. But I watched most of the episodes at 2x to give reference.
Oh.
I slowed it down during the fight scenes, but like the dialogue is unbearable.
Yeah, I mean, you still have like the characters have cool powers and shit. And yeah, that's still there.
Do
But
they?
you have
Do
to
they?
back it with. Sorry?
Do they?
I mean, fucking Morgan and Siegfried have like the same fucking like sword beam that's been there since facing.
Yeah, no,
so.
but like fucking Karna and Asivebron, I don't know what's
No,
gonna happen with
Carbon's cool.
Yeah.
Karna's cool.
Yeah, no, and
what's his face? I
Asivebron
like.
is like super awesome, right? Like I mean, it depends
He hasn't done much
how
yet.
deep you are into the esoteric stuff. But all of Asivebron is super cool. I don't know what's gonna happen with him. I haven't gotten to where I assume he dies. But he's super cool. As a concept, he's great.
Okay, I also like the what's his fucking Shakespeare. That was actually pretty well done in terms of fate. I think like it plays off the ideas of what the heroic spirits are. So where he can like rewrite the legends or whatever, sort of.
Yeah. The powers are cool. They still work. But that's because Tideman kind of tries to.
There's an easy like there's a lot of framework he can work with, so it's hard to fuck that.
Yeah, no, but he's still playing well with the formula, I think. But it's just a shame everything isn't there.
I actually thought the whole power thing in this show was just like kind of an interesting overall. Even I mean, all the main characters, their main power is beam spam of various forms. And
yeah, I don't care about those, to be honest.
And like even just some of the things they do with like the command spell system and whatnot, but it just doesn't really like matter at all, and doesn't. It just sort of is, oh, here's now this thing, and I don't know. I think Apocrypha is just pretty boring overall.
Yeah, it is. That's why I speed it up.
Yeah, I dropped it. I don't know if I'm gonna finish it ever. But
if you want beam spam, just watch the caster parts in Unlimited Blade Works. Honestly, it's like much better effects, much better animation, everything. So like, there's really no reason to watch this if you're not already too deep into Nasuverse. One thing I want to say about like, I think the biggest thing that is besides all that stuff is the atmosphere is just, it tries to be tense and have like heavy drama, but like it's just really dull and flat. Versus like if you've read the visual novel, at least there's like a real sense of dread and like Lovecraftian horror that you can get from the novel, which is a thing that Nasu likes doing a lot. You can see that in Tsukihime and stuff too. So Karna Kyokai, things like that. And it's just not here at all. It's just it's like a really cheap imitation, which is kind of ironic considering the themes.
Yeah, I agree. It's silly. I don't think it's worth watching, no matter what, unless you just wanna. I don't know. Actually, I don't know who this is for. I have no idea.
Unless you just really love Mordred or
Ruler and Astolfo, I guess.
No,
Yeah.
you will play like the game, the FGO instead.
Right. You'd still play FGO, but if you're really deep and you really need to see more of them, and you want to watch Astolfo suck the main character's dick all the time, I mean, this is the show for you, I guess.
Yeah, I have no idea. I don't feel this is for fans of Fate, and I don't feel this is for new people.
Yeah,
so it's like completely aimless.
Oh, it's not great.
I'm just here for the plot stuff. Like,
also, I should be mentioned, they adapted this because the characters are popular in FGO. They didn't adapt this because people like this. Like, the light novels are not well received. So just like, oh, we have money, let's just adapt the thing that we
got
have.
A1 Pictures to adapt it, not a good studio.
If I could slightly dissent here.
Sure.
There is one thing that was drawing me into Apocrypha. I mean, it's undoubtedly like the worst Fate spinoff so far, I think. And there's no point to watching it if you don't watch Fate. But the mystery of why Shiro is in it.
Yeah,
is
okay, I was
that drew
actually
me in.
interested in that. Like,
yeah,
I agree with that. Yeah, continue. You can keep going.
Oh, I mean, that's about all there is to it. I mean, some of the characters are endearing, Mordred and Astolfo, but they're not in it enough to really matter. But yeah, just the mystery of it kind of draws me in just it's just enough to keep me interested as a Fate fan.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with the premise or a lot of the early background material of the show. It's just once you get into the battle royale aspects that. Oh.
Yeah, it's a total mess. But
yeah, it like dilutes his focus even more, like with twice as many masters and servants, although they sort of have the amount of masters, I guess. So like literally every master is who cares.
yeah,
Yeah.
and they also abuse distortion way too much in the sound effects for me.
Yeah,
It seems like every time there's a clash, the sound just distorts instead of actually giving some real sound effects.
All right. Unless anyone else wants to shit on it some more, because I think we can do it all day. I think it's best we move on to another great show this season. There's a beast under the skirt, a wolf in woman's clothing, or as I like to call it, when the skirt cries. Where's Jiggles? Because I'm sure he might be the only other person who finished the show besides me.
I finished it. This is the only show. This is the only show I actually managed to keep up on all season.
I'm so sorry.
That's because the episodes are like 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't like what's the deal with the recent trend in hentai shorts? Anyways, is this a thing now? Like, there's one last season, there's one this season. I think there was one the previous season.
This one and the one last season with the monk dude are both by the same animation studio, and I guess that's just what they do now is animate really bad josei manga. So.
All right.
Because that's technically what this is.
But is this just a like not calling it hentai is like a marketing scheme or something? Maybe people will buy it.
It is 100% hentai.
100%.
It's not even good hentai. I don't even know what to say. If you like really rapey cross-dresser hentai, I mean, this is a show for you. I don't know why I finished it. I think I was building a different narrative in my head of just how many ways you could take the same premise and make it better, but I didn't. So
yeah, this show's not good.
Okay, let's move on.
I mean, I had a fun time watching it, but it's not good.
You know, I didn't even have a fun time watching it after the first 2 episodes, so I can't even say that. Anyways, let's move on to it.
Better as horror than hentai, and it doesn't do that well either.
Let's move on to a show that I think some people have actually watched, maybe, and I don't know. I've heard a lot of weird things about this show. Stan Lee's The Reflection. Did anyone here watch it?
I dropped it after 2 episodes. If anyone else wants to talk first.
Yeah, same.
I finished it.
All right, go ahead.
So the reflection is pretty bad in almost every regard. Like, it's a Stan Lee superhero show, and well, to address this first, it's really uncreative, and every character is basically a copy of another popular superhero, and the whole concept is basically just a bad X-Men copy. So that aside, the first couple of episodes, and by the first couple of episodes, I mean actually every episode except the last 2, is kind of in the same way. I mean, it's especially bad early on. I think that's the reason why some of the people dropped it. I mean, they can correct if they didn't drop it for that reason. But it's mostly just action that is happening for the sake of action without any proper introduction to the story or the characters. So the first couple of episodes mostly consist of characters randomly appearing and fighting for the sake of fighting, and only afterwards we try to get a little bit of the plot. But the plot is like only one certain event that we don't know why it is happening, and that is continuously stretched out for 10 episodes, I think, with the same dry, boring cardboard characters that don't have much personality. If they have a character arc, and I think they attempted to have that for 2 characters, it is not concluded by the end, and the whole plot is really dry because it's the same thing happening, and there is no depth to what is happening, and neither do we know why it's happening. So the only thing that is left is the action. And then we get to the actual last 2 episodes, and they try to tie the plot together, and it's horrible. Like everything that most of what is happening in these episodes is entirely illogical. Like stuff just happens that should not happen, and it's never explained why it's happening. And characters are acting, well, especially the antagonist is acting in stupid ways only for the sake of acting stupid. And the whole last 2 episodes revolve around a concept that is never properly explained, and neither it is explored. That is just thrown in there to do some major hand waving and try to justify what is happening. But even then, it doesn't happen, and then it just somehow gets concluded. The most funny part is that in the last episode, there are magical girls starting to appear, like 3 or 4 magical girls that randomly appear and do nothing, which was just kind of hilarious. And by the end, the series just gives you a big fuck you to the end, because the last 10 seconds are the most forced cliffhanger I've ever seen. So they are maybe planning to make a sequel. I think they're at least leaving the possibility opening, like with every superhero show by Stan Lee. But I don't think it will actually earn enough money to get a sequel. At least I hope it doesn't, because it's dry, it's stale, and the plot is actually is completely stupid and sucks. That's it. Don't watch it. Oh, and forgot to mention, but the visuals are kind of cool actually. I know there are some pretty different opinions. Some liked them, some didn't. I actually like the visuals. I think the animation was really sloppy at times, but it actually does feel like a comic book, which some people did not like. But I thought it was actually kind of cool stuff, especially in the early episode. There are some cool tricks with how they utilize some background panels in New York to, like, they have this media panel on a street in New York where there's usually just some TV shit playing or something, and the characters are fighting in front of that, and on the thing they display the usual effect bubbles with like sound effects in them and stuff like that. And I thought that was a pretty cool trick, but it stops. And also for the soundtrack, there's one song that is like played 2 times.
That's
every
why I
episode.
dropped it.
Yeah, and
That's why I dropped it.
Yeah,
I dropped it because of Sky Song.
Yes,
It's a good song, but
it's a good song, yes, but just listen to it and don't watch the show, and you will enjoy the song more than you do when you watch the show.
Yeah, the
Because
show ruins the
just ruins it.
song.
Yeah, that's a pretty good summary by Thorgot. One thing I wanted to say is I think you said they didn't explain enough about why they were fighting. I think that would have been fine, but they actually did try to explain it in the first episode. They had like this whole villain monologue at the end, and it still did not explain anything. They just said a bunch of crap.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
they tried to do both.
Yeah.
And then failed for both. And then with like what you were saying, I like the visuals, but I really thought the animation was also not good, like you were talking about. There was just no weight to anything, any movements, any of the hits, anything like that.
Yeah, all that put together is my summary of it's the perfect show to exemplify why I don't like American comics.
I also enjoy the art style. I thought the color was a little too muted though, for like the backgrounds in the city and stuff. It's just very gray.
I think that's an overgeneralization, Kai. I think maybe superhero comics, Western superhero comics.
Oh, sure, that's what I meant by American comics.
Yeah, I kind of see that, but I also think that the reflection is pretty much everything that is wrong with those kind of superhero comics, because all the characters that appear, like I said, are just cardboard copies from other characters, and there's like stuff like themes like discrimination against the people with superpowers, like we see in X-Men, but they don't go anywhere with that concept. It just exists for the sake of existing, and they never do something with it except saying, hey, look, we have this theme, but they never actually explore that theme. So I think it just takes all the elements and tropes from the superhero shows in the worst way possible, and does not properly use them. And I think that's one of the most off-putting aspects. And it also just has a really weird narrative, because there's the event, the reflection that happened and turned everyone to people with superpowers for some reason happened in 2 different ways. Like there are people that transformed in one way and people that transformed in another way, and somehow naturally just all the people of one kind end up being the villains, with only one exception. and vice versa. And I think it's a really weird narrative to just have these people be naturally villains and the others be naturally the heroes. It just feels really awkward and not thought out.
In conclusion, read Worm instead of watching The Reflection.
I'll second that.
Me too.
Worm's pretty good. I think that's enough on The Reflection, though. We're going to move on to another show that some might say had some potential this season. I won't say who, and I won't say who was telling everyone to keep watching this show when they shouldn't have been. But anyways, Classroom with the Elite. Did anyone here finish it?
I finished it today.
Impressive, impressive. All right, start us off again if you want.
Sure. So, Classroom of the Elite is a show about people going to a special school that has like a 99% of people getting employed or going to university afterwards. It's like a really cool and supposedly prestigious school of elite people who are supposed to have some really good education there. And it has a really weird concept of school education. Like, I don't want to ramble too hard on the premise, but frankly said,
Well, the premise is essentially like darker or like more serious Kakeguri, except without all the comedy and the stuff that made Kakeguri like work. So, and less gambling.
yeah, it kind of is in a way, but the way they're doing the education and the stuff that is happening in the school and the way they justify it with, well, there's a system of there's a system of points that students accomplish, and they can buy stuff with these points. And the whole school has basically that everything. Like the school is basically like a city. It has a cinema. It has stuff to swim, etc. It's literally like a small city, and they can buy everything with these points, and these points get assigned monthly, and they basically act like currency. And there are 4 classes sorted by the amount of coins they get monthly: A, B, C, and D. And depending on their actions, the class count of points they get monthly is adjusted in some way according to some principles that are never revealed. That's like one big mystery behind the show, but that mystery is addressed early on, like saying, hey, it exists, but there is never any progression on that front. And it's just really weird because, frankly put, what happens in the series and how they are explaining it is not how a school could possibly function, nor how a school could guarantee this 99% rate of people getting into their jobs or into the universities they want afterward. It frankly doesn't work in any possible tangible manner to combine that premise with the result and the stuff that's happening.
I think questioning the premise in as much of the show is kind of missing, kind of like the show is not good, but I don't think the premise necessarily is where it's not good in as much.
Yeah, I mean, there's enough anime that's incredibly absurd about the nature of high school.
I think the show just expects you to be able to buy into the setting that it takes place in, which if you didn't, that's fair enough. I think there is a lot more structural problems with the show specifically, or no, not structural per se, but more execution based problems, because I think the structure in as much as that it takes this ridiculous setting and the TrueAnime genre stuff, and I think it's trying to actually say something cool about the characters and just have them be, each character has 2 different sides to them and it's all about taking off the masks, so to speak. And I mean, they say that a lot in the specific show, even. Just about how everyone has these different personas that are different from how they actually act and think and feel. And it's trying to look at and examine how the 2 faces of a person interact. But it also completely fails in the execution a lot of times because it gets too caught up in the setting and the anime bullshit. Personally, I thought the first 6 episodes or so were really good because it knew when to restrain itself, but then it lost the restraint. Ariel, I know you were going to say something, so I'll...
Yeah. So the show frustrated me to no end. It has so it's probably one of the best cases of like fan service, just like obliterating any kind of interesting aspects, and not just like not just like fan service of like tits or whatever, but like fan service is kind of like a general concept. And it's so frustrating because it feels like they have some really interesting idea. It's like you don't necessarily, you kind of the initial kind of like setup is kind of at the beginning, but yeah, through those like first 6 episodes, you start to get like more. There's some like intrigue going on in the background. There's some interesting stuff happening, and then it just sort of drops it, and it does this repeatedly.
7 happens. I was pretty sold for the first 6 episodes and dropped immediately on episode 7.
But I kind of felt like it was kind of going that way anyway. Like I see this. There's a couple times where like I feel like it does that already, kind of prior to even 7. But it's definitely 7 when it just starts to get like the entire series. Yeah, that's the thing. Like I watched it all the way through because I was not because I thought it was ever going to get better, but because I felt like there might be some more interesting concepts in there that like it had, and there are. It just. I shouldn't have.
Yeah, I feel ya. Especially the second half, it just felt like you mentioned the fan service, and just God, there were like 7 different fan service episodes, just the whole second half, really. And
such a derailment.
Yeah, it just derails all the good aspects of the show, and it focuses on this like really schlocky intrigue sort of plot that completely forgets about the characters because they're too busy all being Keikaku Dori, justice plan mastermind type dudes. When before that, there was those elements that were there, but it was also centering it around the characters' development growth and how they reacted to having to play all these mind games. And once that was thrown out the door, it was like, it's a worse Death Note, which if you're a worse Death Note, then you're not doing something good. So, Thorgot, I interrupted you earlier. If you wanted to continue or say anything else, did you have anything to say? Does anyone have anything to say?
Disappointing. Let's move on.
Okay. Next show is one of my favorite mangas, Centaur's Worries. Did anyone watch this?
I did.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, I've seen like half of it.
All right. I do want to preface this by saying it is one of the worst adaptations I ever had the misfortune of watching of fantastic source material. However, I will open up the rest to everyone else.
I mean, I dropped it about halfway through. I liked what I watched, but I probably want to go back and read the source material because it was just awkward adaptation-wise.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt about the show too. That it was just awkward all the way through. And I dropped it somewhere like episode 4 or something, where it was. It had these aspects that were kind of cool about like acceptance and different people learning to live together and accept their differences. Then it had this weird big brother aspect too that was never capitalized on, and I was just confused at where we were going and how I should feel about the characters and just everything in general.
I think it was more focusing on the world and not so much the characters usually. I mean, they did get some focus, but it felt like the world was more in the limelight.
Speaking from someone who's read the source material, it's definitely more focused on the political aspects of the world, but all within centered around this daily life of the Centaur and her friends. So,
Yeah, I think I watched the show, and I think the biggest problem I had with Centuar's Worries is that it kind of felt like it didn't have a proper identity, or that it wasn't really consistent. I think it switched too much around between what it actually was trying to be. Like some of the episodes were focused on just slice of life between these monster girls, but then we got the other stuff, and we got really weird episodes, and it kind of always shifted the focus while the characters were kept relatively stale. Then we got a episode about working. Then we got an episode in which the characters looked at each other's vaginas for some reason, and by the very end we got some pointless arcs and other arcs in which the show just failed to be a parody of something proper, and I just felt like the show really had no identity to stick to, and the characters didn't carry through the show, so it just felt really inconsistent. And the biggest problem I had with the show was the politics that were addressed earlier, because those were frankly just really weird, because the show sometimes tries to bring up a theme of racism, but whenever the show does, it just feels really awkward, because the show has a very weird idea of what racism actually is, and the state they live in is really weird, because they are actually living in something that is literally an authoritarian surveillance state, but they never really extend on that and just show it at the offsites that all the people are under constant surveillance by the state. And it's just really awkward how they just show that at the sides, so that people get like sent to correction facilities for stuff like accidentally cutting someone's hair, and they just introduce many weird aspects of the politics in the sidelines but never address them, and this makes for a really awkward undertone. And this all finalizes in the second half of episode 10, where we get them reenacting the Holocaust for only the sake of showing, I don't know, of torture porn, I guess, because there was really insubstantial coverage of the Holocaust, in which we just saw a child suffering for no reason, and that child was a character that had basically no relevance in every other part of the story. I just feel it's a really inconsistent and awkward show most of the time.
So I actually I agree with a lot of that said, and there's I'll say this anime is one of the few ones where I definitely think like watching the OP sort of just tells you exactly what the problem is. And the problem is like it's just this anime doesn't know what it is, and it has like a multi personality disorder. Like 1 minute it's this, then the next minute it's like a completely different person. And you can see where it looks like, oh, we're focusing on this character, but then it goes like, oh, the side character, we're gonna make this character like even more important because it seems like we like them. And oh, now we're doing something like this, and there's no real good connection between this story and that story, except we sort of have the characters here. And then all of a sudden, like we're just going to introduce this like mermaid character and her childhood friend, and all of a sudden like he's carrying her. I'm like, wow, that's a cool story, but like this just came out of nowhere, and I don't know if it's ever going to be revisited again. I mean, they're in the OP, but like I've only saw them once, and it was just like came out of nowhere that they were there. And it just feels like this is a situation where like there are 5 different people trying to make an anime, and everyone wanted to do their own thing, and they decided to like, hey, you know what, like you take care of this part, then they like high five, then another person just goes off and they're where they want to go. And what's crazy about it is that the individual parts actually were good. It's just that it was just I was just amazed at like where this story was going, especially like it didn't bother to even try to like help you along. You're just along for this ride that was incomprehensible, and was just relying on the fact that the individual and small parts of the series were actually decent, but it was too much to handle, and there's lots of weird sort of conflicting things that came from the anime, and it didn't give you a good means to handle it.
All of this, I guess this is once again me speaking as someone who read the source material, is all of the like the random vignettes into the Holocaust or whatnot. They're all things that were in the original work, but I put all of the negatives of the anime strictly on how it adapted it, because they failed to connect the adapting parts a lot of the time, and as much that the storytelling in the anime or in the manga one, since it's chapter by chapter, right, and not single episodes, you go into each chapter expecting a different sort of vignette, and it establishes the whole sort of the whole storytelling of, oh, now we're going to be in a different type of the world immediately, like, and it also establishes the relative weird darkness with the like the horse vagina chapter is chapter 0. That is the prologue of the series. So, and it sets the tone really well for it. So as I watched it, all I could see was them just brutalizing more or less the basic structure of the work to try and. I don't think the work is even really possible necessarily for you to adapt into an anime, unless honestly it may be like short nature, because the structure of the vignettes doesn't work when they're next to each other per se. So because you're primed differently when you watch something as opposed to that. Yeah, does anyone else have anything else to say or ask?
The ED was fantastic. That's all.
The ED was also just hilarious because it looked like people just wanted to find excuses to draw some really cool like animation sequences they've seen in other shows, and they just try to like shoehorn it into a story where it doesn't really fit. But beyond that, I mean, the ED did actually look pretty cool in parts, even if it doesn't really make sense in the anime. But hey, actually, I really like what Contessa said, because that definitely, it makes a whole lot more sense hearing that.
Yeah.
All right. I think we're done with that. So let's go on to Nanasanbaru, I think it's called. Fastest Finger First, the quiz bullshit.
Yay.
All right, everyone. And I want to note that it is currently 5 p.m. my time, which means I'm going to try and kind of push along these next couples, except the big ones. So go ahead.
Cool. So Fastest Finger First, sports anime, but like it's I feel like kind of unappreciated this season because I think it executes in all the strong animation necessarily, but I feel like it executes really well on sort of the tension aspects of sports anime, and like generally it's kind of like tries to hype things, but it doesn't ever get like absolutely ridiculous. I mean, that's not true. It doesn't go for like entire arcs that are absolutely ridiculous about like mundane shit that sports anime often kind of do. It does a good job of kind of presenting the rules of Quiz Bowl, of like explaining kind of the strategy of it, and then kind of like letting you watch someone actually and the main character's thought processes and seeing him like answer a question with like limited information is real good. It feels kind of like a detective show, except he's listening to the explanations are usually pretty good. Kind of hate that the like evil character of like this series is a cross-dresser. It really kind of comes across and he's just kind of like punitively evil, which common for shonen, but it really just the way that villain is presented is too much for the series. I feel like that's otherwise doesn't go out of its way in that direction, and but overall I think it turned out.
Cool.
Yeah, I agree mostly. I think it's a really nice introduction to the subject of Quiz Bowl because it shows how it's not only answering questions but the strategy and also the variations that are behind it. And I think it does exploring that really well. And I think it's also nice to see other characters, because the main character at the start he was a smart guy, but he never done really Quiz Bowl before. And I think it's really nice to see how he starts to more and more engage with the subject and starting to like it, and especially to see why he likes it and what he likes about it, and well, simply how he starts to accept it and engage with it. I think that's a pretty nice aspect of the show. And I also And while I kind of see how you can be bothered by the final quote-unquote antagonist, because he is somewhere along the lines of inherently evil, I actually liked some of the stuff that he did because he challenged the meta of what they actually did during the quiz ball, and it was really nice
Yeah,
to
that's
see other
absolutely true.
characters engage with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a really groundbreaking show, but I definitely like it and enjoy it. And if you have an interest in quiz ball, I would definitely recommend it. And even if not, I think it's a very engaging watch, so I would recommend it.
All right. Does anyone else have any thoughts on it? Going. Okay. Restaurant to Another World, Isekai Shokudo, I think. Forget. Whatever. Did anyone watch it?
Yes.
You're a workhorse. All right. Start us off.
Right. Yeah. So it's a show about, well, a restaurant in another world that spawns some kind of interdimensional doors to places in well, another world, and these doors lead to a restaurant in our world, and these characters from another world come in that restaurant to eat food there. So that's just the basic premise. It's an Yashke slice of life type of show. So there's not much more than the premise I just cited. It's pretty enjoyable to watch though if you're into that kind of show. The atmosphere is really relaxed and good. The food is the art of the food is really nice. The art in general is really beautiful in my opinion, and it actually really does a well job at the atmosphere. Also, the soundtrack is nice. So it definitely, if you're looking for that kind of show, it's good. And I also really like the way they portray the other world, the isekai world, in how it always shows the characters in that world and where they live, and then shows how they get into that restaurant. And it's always nice to see a bit of, so we always have a little bit of world building in a sense before we get to the actual eating part. And I think it's pretty nice to see, to just get that general grasp of the world and how these characters feel, and then have them, well, relieve while eating. I think it's really relaxing, but the world building is pretty episodic, so it's not like it's connected into a greater narrative most of the time, sadly. So it might be for some people that the show continues to grow a bit more stale, but I definitely think it's doing what it wants to do, and it's good at being so. So if you're into that kind of show, I would recommend it.
All right. Moving on to Nora, Princess, and Stray Cat. I didn't even know this was a show. Did anyone watch this?
Yes.
All right. Round 3.
All right. So yeah, it's a short show. It's a short, like really short, 3-4 minutes maybe, which is it's somewhere similar to Teekyuu. Well, not completely. It is nowhere near as non sequitur as Teekyuu, but it's had the same general kind of, well, more quirky and abstract humor where the stuff that's happening doesn't always make sense. But at other parts, it's also attempting to be a parody. Like, it was really funny. One episode was actually Quiz Bowl parody that aired in the same season as Fastest Finger First aired, which was pretty funny. So it has this general kind of quirky, abstract humor and sometimes parody. It's more like the episodes. Well, the episodes are individual, and it's kind of hit and miss. Some of the episodes are relatively funny in my opinion, and have a decent limit point to the jokes, and some are pretty boring and uninteresting, or just don't have much of a punchline to go for. It's just a comedy short. I don't have any particularly strong or particularly bad feelings about it. Go watch it if you're looking for something short, I guess.
Okay. Next is a show that had a bit of a kerfuffle at the end of the season that we will not be addressing here. Hajimete No Gal. Peyton? We can't hear you if you're trying to speak.
Still can't hear you. While he's figuring that out, though, I'll give an introduction.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Oh, there he goes.
Yes.
Okay, I guess something must have happened to my mic, so I just had to switch, and now I'm working on my laptop. Did anyone else watch it?
Just
Does
the
not appear so.
2 episodes I watched with you.
Just one episode.
Yeah, just
Okay.
one episode.
All right, so I will say that I greatly enjoyed this anime. However, I'm not going to try to say that it's actually particularly good. And I will say that probably one of the main reasons I enjoyed it was because the English dub was a lot more adventurous. And my gosh, it just came up with some of the kookiest and ridiculous lines I've ever heard in an anime, similar in lines to the Ghost Story dub. So it was just sort of, it was enjoyable in that way. Now, what actually really, one of the main things that really caught me about this series was actually fascinating to see how they were trying to sort of work the series. And so it actually, there are multiple different Kogels throughout the series, and each of them sort of represent their own sort of subtype of Kogel. And so it was trying to work with the base material, and then it would sort of set it up into a and it was based in a general rom-com format. And what I really appreciated with it is that it actually seemed like it was trying to be inventive, be new, and sort of push some boundaries. The problem is I think that's where it ran into a lot of trouble, because in its attempt to try to be like, to try to bring something new to the table, it actually angered a lot of people. Like, gosh, like one character is basically a pedophile, and a lot of people hated that guy, even though he was like created specifically to be hated, and he was used to basically just like show how crappy the guy's friends were. But then it sort of backfired, and so it was an interesting attempt, because it was, I would say it felt like an ambitious way to try to make something that is sort of trashy, like interesting and unique. It's just that I will say that it didn't really work the way they wanted it to, and it caused like legitimate problems that people were sort of upset about. But it was just I guess the best way they're trying to be a little too cute in how they work the different aspects of the anime to produce the end result, and it just didn't result. It didn't produce something that was particularly good.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's not a good anime.
that's where I want to jump in here. Like, it doesn't succeed in doing things, but it's if you go away thinking that it's totally bereft of anything, or it doesn't try to at least, give the characters some personalities or create some emotional drama, I think that's a misconception. It tries, it's just not particularly great. Like Phaeton said, though, the dub was pretty cool.
Yeah, and I mean it's surprisingly well crafted, a lot better than I thought it would be. It's just, I guess the best way to put it, it's like if you sort of go to a comedian, and if they're trying to do something way out there, they may have put a lot of thought into their skit, but it can just like not really work. And to look at it would be like a huge discussion, but I would say that's the main thing about it, is that it's an anime that there was a lot of effort put into it and a lot of good work put into it. However, it doesn't work. And it's a shame that it doesn't work.
So you're saying that it's a show with a lot of potential that fails to capitalize on it?
I don't necessarily say it's potential, because I think there's certain the general premise itself really just like shoehorns it in. And so like it seems like there's a low cap on what this anime could be. And I think they're trying to like do different things to see, maybe like if we try to go this direction and sort of break the mold in this way and do things this way, it can work out. It's just that it didn't really work. And so they're like, you could just look it. I guess the best way to put it is that it would actually be a decent anime to study how like a director looks at something and how they sort of come up and make decisions, and then basically say like, well, why doesn't it work in the end? And I think that's the way I sort of look at it, is that it's really fascinating to see what they were trying to do, and more just to see how it just doesn't seem to work. And to be fair, the ending of the story itself was pretty crappy, where they just sort of threw it in, and just like they didn't seem to have a good idea of how to finish the story. But I mean, there are some cool moments. It's just, again, nothing really seemed to work well in that anime.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything to say on it? I guess not. Right. So next is one of the big headliners this season, and continuing on from the spring, Boku no Hero Academia Season 2. Did anyone here watch it? And thoughts?
I watched it, but I have some negative thoughts on it, so I think it'd probably be better if someone more positive would probably go first.
All right, we just summoned the Kura to discuss it again, so hopefully he'll show up soon.
If there's no one else, I can go for it.
Yeah, go for it.
So again, like I would say, My Hero Academia, like it's solid. Like it's a really good anime. Like I'm not going to deny that it's a good anime. I just say this is the arc in which, or this is the season where I sort of the spell sort of wore off, and it really feels like this is probably about as good as it's ever going to be, and it's just going to be a really good anime, and I don't see how it could become something that's really special. And I will say part of it is that you have two sort of high points. You have a tournament arc, which again is an amazing tournament arc, probably one of the better tournament arcs I've seen in a shonen story, and just a generally good tournament arc. Like if you want to see a good one, look at the first part of My Hero Academia, and then it sort of pushes the boundaries, and then also introduce an interesting character called Stain, which is a fascinating character, and that's a very interesting arc and the way that it moves forward. I would just say what it really sort of shows is that this anime just doesn't seem to have a good idea of how it wants to show evil. And I think that's the big problem that it has, where it has sort of a good grasp on what it means to be a hero and what the idyllic hero should be. However, can't seem to figure out what would evil be and what would bad be. And I think that's the biggest limitation on it, is that there's definitely it feels like there's only half the story going on there, and it's missing a crucial part. And I don't know if the story's ever going to get a villain that is really worthy of the story to be good, and you sort of need that for a good superhero one. And the antagonists just don't really seem to be up to snuff, and I'd be shocked if they do. And I think that's a big shame about it. But I mean, if you want to watch a good shonen, this is probably the best one you can watch around for something that's come out lately. And I mean, it's good, amazing action, cool story moments. I just think it's sort of suffering on the villain department, which is unfortunate.
That's an interesting quibble to have with it. The villains are not discreet enough.
No,
or they're not. Their evil isn't. Their motivations aren't discreet enough, or
so part of it is that it doesn't have a good idea of what should evil be. Where at
see,
best
I think that's kind of strength, though.
At best you have one character who is sort of just like a crazy fanatic, and that's all they sort of go through. Like that person's a fanatic, and then they have a person who is just sort of like a man-child, and maybe he'll develop into something more. But at the end of the day, if the only real problem is that you have guys who just heroes who can't be good enough, and that's sort of the main source of the like tension there, it's sort of disappointing when you have a series that's trying to figure out what's good, if it can't even sort of figure out if it's even doing a worse job of trying to understand what's evil. And I think that just sort of means there's something that just sort of feels a little bit hollow about it. And I honestly feel it'd be better if they just didn't even have villains into it and just focus on the challenge of heroes trying to be hero, and leave the idea of evil to its to the imagination of the audience, because I think that'd be better than just what it's presenting us. Because it's just like Stain was a cool villain to like progress, like have characters develop, but it's really difficult to say like if he should be the ideal of evil, because he doesn't really work. None of the character, like it just yeah, like I think the villains are the weakest part, and it's going to prevent My Hero Academia from being something like transcendent in terms of like shonen anime.
Okay, so you're not a manga reader of it then, are you?
No, I'm not a manga reader, so maybe it does do something more. But I mean, and I will say this is something that like I'm a huge fan of sort of like superhero like comics and all that sort of stuff there. And I mean that a good villain can really like set it up. And that's how actually when you see the iconic parts of like superheroes, it usually comes down to the villain is the one that makes it iconic because it proves they're the ones who really set up the serious trial and tension. And I'm not getting this so far from My Hero Academia, and I'm doubtful it will come. Maybe.
Oh.
But again, like I'm sort of picky on this. I imagine for general consumption, everyone's going to enjoy it. Like you won't not enjoy this anime. I just get the feeling this may not be something you come back to and say that was amazing. That was one of the best sort of superhero stories ever. I don't think it's going to be that. It's just going to be an enjoyable ride, and then eventually it's just going to fade away, and that's sort of going to be it.
Yeah, I wouldn't really class it as much of a superhero show as it is a shonen show. It doesn't really follow traditional comic book superhero stylings, I guess.
Yeah, and honestly, that's something I think did a really good job because the villains haven't played a big part in it. It's just that now it's sort of starting to set up that there is going to be this antagonist force, but the antagonist force just doesn't really seem to be something that is appropriately evil compared to how they're trying to present good.
Right, they're in the back seat compared to the protagonists.
And so the antagonist would probably be better if the story itself wasn't trying to set up basically All Might or something as there's something transcendently good. Because if you're going to try to set up something transcendently good, then you're also going to need to have something transcendently evil, and there's nothing in there that's sort of reaching that.
Yeah.
In which you might as well just have the darker part of good instead of trying to do this sort of half-ass evil kind of thing. But hey, that's sort of me. Again, don't let me talk you out of it if you haven't seen it. Watch it. It's good if you want to get a good shonen one. It's entertaining, and it moves quickly. It doesn't really drag, and that's something I appreciate.
See, I thought this season actually kind of dragged at the very end. It felt like it hit 2 high climaxes and then had 4 episodes of episodes with no tension in them at all at the end, which seems like an odd place didn't seem like a good place to end the season to me.
Yeah, well, I'm also watching the dub, so I haven't seen the last 2 episodes, so you could probably be absolutely correct on that one.
Shit.
It doesn't feel like it's going to finish on a strong note this season.
Yeah, it's slightly entertaining, but there's no tension at all, it felt to me.
Yeah, so I want to add, I think, to the villain part, I think there are those elements of the series that are in direct opposition to All Might and something that is inherently evil, but there's something that is only, weakly hinted at in this season because it just lies at a further point behind in the manga. And it's only an arc we are probably starting. I don't know, I haven't read the manga myself, but it's something that I think, because we have something like a final antagonist that was introduced, first shown in this season, but that we haven't really expanded on, and I think this will be the inherently evil, the direct opposition of All Might that you kind of criticize missing. So I think it's just something that lies further beyond than the manga. And as far as the current arcs are concerned, I think that the villains, especially Stain, was a pretty great villain because he actually had the motivation not only, but I think it's nice to see that we are not having only a good and bad narrative that strictly is black and white, so to say. But I think Stain did a pretty good job at, for one thing, being a villain that has proper characterization and motivation, and on the other end criticize the system they live in, so that we have another negative perspective on All Might and what is going, not on All Might, but on the other heroes, and what is essentially another viewpoint that is possible to the system. So I like the amount of nuance that Stain brought to the series as a villain. And also in general, I'll let you respond first.
And so I completely agree that Stain's a good villain in the way that he's a good villain for what the purpose, for the story purpose, and to challenge the main characters on stuff. And I wouldn't really change him. I guess just to sort of try to clarify more on the idea when I'm talking about evil is that when you look at something that's really evil, it needs to be something that's sort of artistic. And so in the way that for them to be good, for Midoriya to be good, it sort of has to go something above and beyond, and that's what makes him like a true hero. For villains, it can't just be like sort of the big baddie. It needs to be something like above and beyond that makes them evil. Like, and I'll just leave like two good examples. If you look at Joker and or Bane in the like Batman movies, what makes them work are the subtle things and just sort of the thought they put into their actions, and to the point where what they do like is intended for a purpose, and sometimes even small. It's the idea that they had to put effort into causing the evil they cause. It's not just sort of like out of power and all that stuff. It's sort of like a very careful, selected, and planned, and just like it's designed to do something. It's designed to make it as worse as possible because they just want it to be as worse as possible. That's sort of the evil I'm looking for. And I don't know if the big bad's going to do it. Maybe he will, but I'm extremely doubtful of it. But continue.
I actually want to butt in here and say last thoughts. We can do one more round, but we need to move on. So.
Well, just quick last thought. I wasn't planning going on for much long. I just want to say, well, Phaeton already said it, but it's a great show, and what I especially appreciate is how they are not only doing the action, but actually focus on the individual characters' abilities and what they are capable of, and how those can be utilized and working together, and also how, lets the characters develop in their fights, and using the fights to show us how the characters change and manage to overcome themselves and properly make use of what they are capable of, and just them growing and advancing on the road of being heroes. I think that's pretty nice. Well, if you like Shonen, go watch Boku no Hero Academia.
All right, that's the last word there. Let's move on to another show that I've never heard of here, called Heybot. Is anyone here watching Heybot?
Uso watched Heybot, like, I think he even watched it twice, but his mic is rip. So I don't know if we should ping him again.
Yes, someone go ahead and ping him. We can come back to it if he does. All right, we'll move on for now to Love and Lies, Koi no Uso. Did anyone watch Love and Lies? I guess not. All right, let's move on to another big name show that ended the season. That was 2 core from the spring. Recreators. Did anyone actually end up finishing Recreators here?
I did.
Yeah, of course.
All right, you guys, start us off.
Oh, be my guest.
All right. So I finished Recreators, and I did not like Recreators at all. So Recreators is this show about, well, that's about characters coming out of, getting transferred out of stories into the real world in which they are written, and then engaging in some conflict, to put it very bluntly and basically. And it's a kind of cool, or at least interesting premise, to bring characters out of fictional stories that are written in the world, and then let them confront the authors of the very stories they live in, and stuff which is happening, which is some kind of cool meta work. And I think there are some nice aspects about showing us what writing is about, or being an author in the show, that I really appreciated. But I think in the terms of general narrative, the series flat out failed. Especially in the second half, like half of the episodes were just one really long, drawn-out battle, and in general, the show mostly features action for the sake of action that results of a really strongly depicted us and them narrative that is never properly explained, and the characters are, for the most part, not really well motivated. So we end up with characters that fight only because, I don't know, this person, there's a character that literally fights because I don't like this person, and this person is in team B, so I choose team A. And so the series establishes this really strict us and them narrative, which kind of leads to all the pointless action, which is one problem I have with the show. But the biggest problem I have with the show is how this action is then played and how the fights are played, because it is frankly put illogical, and the show that doesn't really understand itself or the meta world that it's working with. The show has different ideas that it tries to implement, and in the end, they end up logically not adhering to what they presented earlier in the show. And at multiple occasions, they just say stuff that sound cool to justify things that actually don't make sense. And a lot of the actions is really ungrounded in any kind of logic that should be present in the universe. And also the antagonist is overpowered to the extent that she is nearly omnipotent, and there are not many good reasons for why she is so, and especially for why she, well, I'm not going to too much spoiler, so I'm avoiding to saying that, but also some parts of the premise are never fully explained. So it just uses so it just has lots of leaps in logic and inconsistencies to make stuff work out, and just to turn it to a huge action fest that is not properly motivated. So it was pretty disengaging for me to watch. Also, by the end, there is one thing that did not get properly concluded, and the main character is pretty useless, but I don't want to get too much into that. But yeah, I think it's too action focused and doesn't do a good job at explaining the action or justifying the action. So I think it's pretty disengaging and doesn't really utilize its concept either.
All right. Personally speaking, I dropped the show after like 3 episodes. It just wasn't engaging to me. I'm glad I'm glad I didn't apparently miss much. Does anyone else have any thoughts on the creators?
Well, I personally didn't have any strong feelings about it. I enjoyed some of the characters. I thought it seemed like a kind of, how to put it, wishy-washy commentary on artistic creations taking on a life of their own. How the audience really drives creativity, I guess, in some sense. But I liked seeing, the reactions of characters who have been put in just terrible circumstances and how they would address the people who put them in those circumstances ultimately. I thought seeing that with some of the characters was a good touch. And I thought the action was done okay. I mean, it was better than, how do I put it? I don't know. It wasn't spectacular, but I thought it was fine. Basically, what it comes down to. And I thought the ending was a nice wrap up. I'm not a big fan of happy endings, or it wasn't really. Not that it was a happy ending, but I thought it concluded well, personally. That's all I can really say.
Yeah, I think the parts that you addressed with the creations meeting their creators in January, when they actually made some kind of use of the premise they had, I think that was the most interesting parts of the show, and that had the most substance. But sadly, these wasn't really the majority of what actually happened in the show, and it never went too much with it.
Yeah, I could have done with more of a Blitz and Alisteria. I thought when they were interacting with their creators, that was kind of a high point.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. We're nearing the end here. So moving on to the next show, Knights and Magic. Did anyone watch this? Have anything to say on it?
I watched. I got something to say.
All right. Keep it quick, because I know the next one's going to be pretty long.
Okay, so I only made it halfway through Knights of Magic just because life came in the way, so it's gonna be a bit later before I finish watching it. But I think it might be one of the best adaptations I've ever seen, mainly because this story is so trope ridden and just so like you basically have seen most of this stuff before, and it just sort of has a few new things on it, and the idea but basically like you could see where all the pieces have been drawn from like other stories. So what they did for the anime is they basically just assumed everyone was already genre savvy, and they basically just sprinting through the story. I want to say that the first episode took up like an entire volume of the light novel, and so this episode just relies on the tropes and cardboard characters because it doesn't give any time for depth and basically says like, oh, here's a character acting in this trope, so you know exactly what this is, and we're not going to spend any more time on it because you already understand it. Let's move on to the next bit. Okay, here's this little scene. We see all the characters do their tropey responses to it. We all sort of know how this goes. Next scene. And just keeps up this high tempo. And it just like the story's just trying to get to the parts that it knows are good in the original story and just speed through everything else as quickly as possible. And I want to say like it's made an extremely enjoyable experience because at the end of the day, like, I mean, if you like the mecha kind of stuff, then you get what you like. And it just sort of goes through the parts that really aren't that great. And it gets to the part that it knows that people will love. And I think a lot of stories would really benefit from just embracing the tropes and just letting the tropes speak for themselves instead of trying to like go through the entire story of how this person became this trope way, because we already know how they became that tropey way.
Yeah, I can kind of agree. I finished the show. It is definitely tropey. Like the main character gets teleported into the other world with literally no explanation, and he is disproportionately overpowered in terms of everything for no reason. So there's that, and all the characters are just were really generic in every possible way of their interactions. The action is decent though, and there's one thing I liked and I enjoyed about Knights and Magic that is the thing that made me keep watching the show, and that is they have mechas in it, but they actually have an aspect of creation and making the mechas, because it's about the main character. He was a mecha otaku in the real world, and in this world where mechas exist, he wants to build them himself and build his own mech, and for that he tries to acquire new materials and technologies, and there's an engineering aspect throughout the series about creating mechas that I think is pretty enjoyable to watch, because it's a rather unusual take on mecha, and it's something that you don't see often, and I enjoyed them trying to get technical about how to create mechas and what to respect, and then see the creations they come up with. And I thought the action was decent, but it grew really stale towards the second half. So yeah, there's not much in the characters or anything, but I guess it's an okay watch if you like mechas. Otherwise, it's probably not a worthwhile experience.
Yeah, so I think the engineering aspect's probably my favorite part of it, and it gets a little abbreviated. I feel like they could have gone more on that. It really makes you an Ishii show that's literally like mostly that, because it's not really something I've seen a lot of prior. The kind of the pacing on it is good in general. It could use it's one of those weird series where I think it actually could use a little bit more like explanation. Actually, like a little bit more exposition might have helped, because there are like whole like there's significant like cuts in time where I just feel like another extra couple of sentences even would have like helped kind of make that transition a little bit more about like when this empire did this and all this happens. And I feel like they could have broken that out a little bit more to be kind of just kind of give us a little more background to what we're going into next. So I'm super glad that the harem never materialized. I assume it's in like the light novels or whatever, but like it basically sets it up and then just goes, nope, we're just gonna keep going with all this other stuff, and that all works out enjoyably.
So would you guys say this is a show that is perhaps a harmless fun, so to speak? Or would you guys recommend the show to people?
It's harmless fun, but it's only something there like if you actually want to watch mecha. Like if you have no interest in mecha, then it's not going to be for you.
But not mecha like Gundam. Like tropey mecha series. Because it's not really concerned about like warfare, like the nature of war or any of that. It's more concerned about like
it just loves giant robots.
You can sympathize if you could see like the main characters love giant robots and you're like, yes, indeed. Giant main character, I sympathize with you, then you will like the show, I think.
Yeah, then it's an enjoyable watch. I agree.
All right, we're very, very nearly reaching the end here. The next show on the list is the Ancient Magus Bride OVA. I'm not sure how much we want to talk about this, considering the. I know, speaking personally, I can't really say anything about the OVA until the anime is aired, so we can speak to it in conjunction to that. But does anyone have any thoughts? Otherwise, our final show we left. I think a lot of people would say the best for last. Made in Abyss. So I'm sure most of us here watched it. Someone else can start us off. Or
Yeah,
I thought the
okay.
show was pretty great for any time that wasn't just Reg and the main girl. Like when there were more than two characters or less than two characters on 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 screen, it was really good. And I found Reg and why can't I remember her name? Riku insufferable when it was just them together.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing I had with this show was that Riko has her motivations, and she, she's an interesting character, but she doesn't really do all that much aside from foil Reg, and their dynamic is established pretty early on. Not saying I didn't enjoy watching Riko. I did, and episode 2 in particular, that they take the time to just give her backstory and her motivations is wonderful. But then, like, I think the series really comes into its own when Nanachi comes in, and then you have some back and forth. It takes Riko out of the story, and you have some time to let them grow, let Reg grow apart from his role with Riko.
I mean,
so
I would definitely.
You can respond first. I'm probably gonna be a little bit.
I was gonna say, I definitely think that I would enjoy going past this more because the group has a third member and thus it won't be those two for most of the time. I feel like this series was also really strong in Ozen's arc, but yeah, I didn't have more to go on there though. So go ahead, Finn. Go ahead, you other person who is going to say things.
All right, gladly. So one thing I'll mention about this is that this show really hits a lot of the things I really love, and I greatly enjoyed going through the anime. If I had to say, if we're going to look at this more academic manner, the main reason why it just works so well is because it captures a lot of sort of the ideas that you'll find in the monomyth and all that stuff. I don't want to go into too great a detail, but basically it's setting itself up as sort of the classic kind of adventure story that's been talked about in antiquity and all that stuff, but it doesn't follow everything perfectly. And so it establishes some very clear tensions that are there at the beginning, and that those tensions is what makes the story so suspenseful at the first part, in which it's clear from the very beginning that the abyss is not something to be trifled with, and yet you see these kids going through there, and so now you're trying to see, like, how's this going to work? She almost died in the first episode, and they're trying to go all the way to the bottom, and she could barely handle like 100 meters down. And so those kind of inconsistencies are the kind of stuff that is propelling the audience to want to watch it more. And more or less, the anime answers it, and the anime is good. However, it doesn't answer it as well as it could be. And so, I mean, and that would sort of be the gripe I had, is that this is an anime that could have been probably one of the best anime ever. And at best, it's going to be great. In my opinion, it's probably just going to be very good and just be an extremely entertaining story. But again, like I don't think it's going to live up to its potential. But again, like it's hard to do that. I would say probably some of the more frustrating aspects is that I feel Riku as a character just isn't what she should be, and I don't know if she's ever going to get better. The best episode about it was the one where she was by herself trying to drag Reg because she was causing so many problems for herself. If she just stopped, there would have been no issues, and yet she just kept on digging her own grave and making things worse for her. But it doesn't really seem like she effectively learned that she was causing her own problems. And so like some of the issues that you see these characters had from the beginning just haven't seemed to be fully addressed. And I don't know, maybe they'll get addressed later, but beyond that, like it has good bones, and it's definitely a must watch.
I actually felt that Riku was the stronger of the main two. I felt that her attitude was really refreshing. I'm going to charge into the situation even if I don't know how I'm going to handle it. Like, she definitely causes her own problems, but I feel like she kind of gets that on some level. Even if it is kind of frustrating.
Yeah, I
feel
agree with that.
Reg kind of just falls flat in that, like, powerful but unwilling to take risks or move on anything. I feel like that got a little bit better towards the end, but it's just like...
Yeah, at some points it felt like there's three characters, even when there's two characters. Like there's Reg and Riku, and then the Abyss. And then there's so much like that episode of Riku being alone is just her versus Abyss. And then the episode of when Riku's out of commission after getting stabbed by the thing is Reg versus Abyss, and it shows how both of those situations would go down, and that without the other one, they'd both die pretty darn quickly. And
yeah, I think that's a good reading of it. That's how I took it too. Like they the whole thing with the arm was Reg realizing that that what was important to him and why he was going into the abyss in the first place, or half of the reason at least, and how they work off each other and support each other.
Yeah, and so I definitely agree with what's been said here. I'm just going to try to encapsulate in some larger themes. Is that when you see characters go through these kind of journeys, there's sort of a couple of ways that can go out. Either A, you have a situation where the characters have their flaws and they go through this trial, and it's through the trials that they learn what's wrong with them and they grow, and then they become the hero that they're supposed to be through the trials of the journey. Or then there's the ones where they're already what they should be at the beginning, and then it's through their will that they end up changing the world around them. And it feels like it's going to more to the latter, where they're sort of changing the world more than the world's changing it, and in minor ways. But it doesn't seem to work as well with the Abyss.
Well, I don't see them changing the world. Like,
Well,
I don't know where are you getting at.
I would say at least with like the Nanachi part, where it really got some of the biggest thing is that their presence there has sort of had a positive effect, and you can it be.
Oh,
and
I think
the
it's
key
a
is-
question of skill then. Like I hear changing the world, and I think like a bigger scale.
Yeah, but it could also just be like them changing the people around them. And so I mean those are the two sort of general ways to go through, but it's an interesting question, because I wonder if the story is going to focus more on like Riku and Rei growing up, but then it also becomes a question. I mean, even they do grow up, if they go on a journey that they can't come back from, then like what's the point of growing up? And so then if it goes the other route and says like they're sort of changing hearts and minds around them, then it sort of comes like, well, are they just going to be leaving a legend? And so I mean, there's just so many things with this with the premise and the story that's conflicting, that like I want to see like how do all these various tensions resolve on a one-way trip, but like you still want to like can this story even have a happy ending? Is it just a sad ending? And I mean, it's done a good job, but even then, like when you see Ozen, when you see Nanachi, it still feels a little bit off. Like it could have been a little bit better. Like it just doesn't resolve the way like that feels like it would have been better, but it's still hitting the points it needs to hit the points, even if it just seems to like be slightly off on them.
I think that the making the dichotomy like that is what's making the problems for you, because I don't find any of that bothersome. Like I don't know. It seems like you have this set idea of what it should be, and it's not doing those, or it's not going one way or another. So then you don't like that aspect of it. Yeah, it's not really bothering me at all. So
No, so okay, so here's a way to put it: is that if you were to record the conversations I had with Kai, you would have heard me pretty much predict almost everything that happened in the first season. And the reason is that, again, like it's a very formulaic story. And so the question is that just because you sort of know like what the key points are going to be, it doesn't mean you know how it's going to end up or what the overall purpose is going to happen. And so even though there's still some further trials to go on, you can give a good guess about what the trials what the trials are going to somewhat be. You still don't know how that's going to work and how the entire story is going to be. And that's where a lot of the tension comes from, is that even if you have a rough idea of what the story is from the very first episode, there's still enough variance, and there's still enough, like this story is intentionally like subverting different things. And so you can't tell like how close is it going to follow this archetypal story type. But again, it's hitting all these points. It's just that sometimes it doesn't hit them in a way that seems like it would have been as impactful. But again, like it does hit them. And so, I mean, I can't complain too much. It's just that I don't know if this anime is going to become a masterpiece, but it definitely is. It definitely is an amazing journey. And I can easily say this could very well be the anime of the year. It's definitely a contender for it.
I think we're just gonna have to disagree on like everything. I think we have like completely opposite approaches to criticism. So
Sure, I do.
I can leave it at that.
About this show, though, I do want to mention other things. Like the production was astounding.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that too.
Just
But you can start.
maybe not the OP, but like this. I did a whole video on the sound effects and how they not only are like there in a way that you don't see in other anime, but are meaningful to the characters and to the story that the show is trying to tell, and inform the show without even using the visuals. And it's stuff like that, like the animation, the painted animation that they use for some of the monsters. Man, just
Yoshinari.
yeah, that stuff, and the writing too is on par. And really the directing, everything about this show is the highest quality you find in seasonal anime.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it does the sound effects like that other anime doesn't, but I would say it does them very good. Like, it's up there with other anime that also do them well. Like, I'm not gonna say I don't think it's particularly unique in that aspect, but it's good. It's very good. I wanted to talk about well, if anyone else has anything to say about that first, I guess.
Or talk about the animation, just the sound.
Either. I was going to talk about the world.
Okay, so this was actually something that it's to a point where like it was an amazing animated sequence, but it was something that it was probably one of the most shocking things I've seen in anime in a long time. And it was Midi's transformation sequence, and also the issue with Riku's arm. And because usually when you see something like that, especially something very traumatizing or bad happen to like a little girl character, it tends to be like, oh, it's implied, or oh, let's cut back and we see shadows. But no, like this anime really put some very just gruesome and just like uncomfortable things like front and center. And I mean, like it was beautifully animated, but man, that just like got me down at just such a deep level watching that transformation. And it's just, I mean, it was just it was extremely effective. But I'm just wondering, like, it almost seemed like it might have gone a little bit too far. I don't want to necessarily say that, but man, like that was hardcore.
I think that's intentional, obviously.
I feel like that was the moment that I actually Midi's transformation was the moment that actually like sold me on the series.
Yeah, the Nanachi episode.
Yeah, just like that entire just Midi.
Yeah, and I guess
I was in tears for like most of that episode. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious. I mean, they set that up to be the perfect way to get the emotional impact. You could have done it better. I mean, what, you get an extremely innocent girl, check, and then you have something really bad happen to her. Check. I mean, there's very few things you can do that are worse, like worse you can do to another human being than that.
This in contrast with the whole Rika's arm thing, which ultimately I didn't care in the slightest when that happened.
Wow, I had to look away for that whole entire episode. I couldn't watch it.
I would say if they would have done some of the cutaway shadows, I probably would have been laughing, just because like it was just so bad watching Ray do pretty much almost everything wrong. Like that was like it was to the point like I was more concerned that he was going to kill her than the injury, because that was like some of the worst medical treatment I've ever seen in my life. And I mean, it's understandable. Most people have no clue what to do in that situation. But like I was just like, no man, like he's doing everything wrong. Like you don't want to do that. But it just kept on going. And then like they showed it there, so then it just became gruesome. Like, oh man, like wow, like he's probably gonna kill her, and he's not helping her at all right now. And again, it's just brutalizing another little girl, a little cute anime girl, which is, I mean, it definitely plays to the heartstrings.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I was gonna say, I think this Made in Abyss. I caught up with the manga after, but I'm not gonna really talk about it. But overall, I think this has like some of the best world building I've seen in anime so far. I really like how it's done. They really make everything feel alive, and Nia was saying that it really captured the sense of exploration and wonder, but it also like sort of contradicts, but like contrast that with the unknown and the horror of the unknown, and with the body horror and all the Lovecraftian stuff of the abyss, and then the unknowingness, and then but the whole draw of it, people go into it anyways, and I felt like it really manages to create the world surrounding the abyss, and then like the whole fascination with it. They made a whole entire city around it, and other nations over there to try to get stuff from there too, things like that. And it's really well fleshed out. I was really impressed by that aspect.
Yeah, I like that. I like that part of the world building too. It didn't feel like it shoehorned in the culture that came up around the abyss. Like when they showed everyone's reaction to that whistle coming up, I was kind of taken aback. I was like, shouldn't they all be kind of sad about this? Why is everyone happy? And it was a good way of showing their kind of values that the people of that culture had.
Yeah,
without telling you how they see everything.
And there's some, and the thing that I like about the world building is that it does such a good job, but it presents things that are off, and yet it just accepts it as normal.
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
Like when you hear the stories of the white whistles, and you hear the stories of her mom, like, wow, she's really not that great of a mother, and she's basically famous because she just like butchers people. Like she's just a straight up just like killer down there, and she's good at her job because she can pretty much like kill anybody else. And then you look at some of the other white whistles, and you see just like what it takes to be successful in the down there is not what we would traditionally look as good, but it's something that is also sort of like praised and endorsed and worship up in the top, and like people don't have an issue with it. Oh yeah, she killed a whole bunch of other people down there. I mean, but yeah, that was a good job of her. And just a fun fact, just to sort of say this is an old story type. The kind of story this is, it's a katabasis, which is the ancient Greek term, which is a descent into the underworld, and sort of hits a lot of that kind of stuff there. But I mean, this is a story that is like millennia old. Like some of the oldest stories are trips to the underworld, and I mean, there's a reason for it, and it's definitely good. Like I'm not saying that as a knock on it. I'm actually saying that it's in a good tradition, and I feel like it's living up to it, and it definitely has done so by building this amazing world of the abyss. And I mean, it's awesome to see. I'm actually somewhat a little bit saddened that we moved so quickly through it, and now we're getting close to the bottom of the returnable depth. And I just wonder like how much more of this could be explored, or is it just going to be newer things once they cross that point of no return?
The manga actually moves a lot faster. This only covers like 15 chapters, I think. But yeah, I was God, the next season's gonna be so good, but the focus is gonna shift a little bit. Yeah, I really hope it does get a season 2 because it hasn't even reached the peak parts yet.
Oh, I can't imagine it wouldn't.
Oh yeah, that bad guy they set up. I mean, when I talk about evil, he is definitely probably a better representation of evil, just because it's oh man, like that guy looks like he should be an awesome antagonist, especially because I don't know if he's even going to be necessarily against them. Like he could just be more neutral or even willing to help them to certain degrees. I don't know. Like there's so many ways the story can go, and it's just again like I gotta say like this story does a lot of things well. I'm somewhat afraid that it might just not live up to this sort of expectation, and it could just sort of it might stumble a bit. But regardless, I definitely think this is going to be the story is definitely going to get better.
Yeah, so one thing I want to mention is what I like most about the series is the world building, and that was already addressed, but especially how the world building is like embedded into the narrative, because what I really like about Made in Abyss is that it does not, like other series, simply pose a final question and then keep that in the bag just to have some motivation for the overarching story to go, but it is continuously explores the world and does not only have that one question in mind, but continues to both answers and poses new questions as we progress with the story. So each episode we get a growing and a more growing and living picture of the abyss and how it functions. And I really like the way they're continuously progressing this instead of just simply having the question of what is at the bottom and then just going down there while never answering that, but how they are making constant and continuous progress towards that question, which I think makes the world not only more living and organic, but also makes it more intriguing to keep watching and makes you more hooked.
Yes, good show.
All right, I think it's about time we wrap up here. Does anyone else have any last thoughts on Made in Abyss this season? Besides, please give us more, because they should.
Oh, one thing: the interview with the what was he? The sound designer? No, not this. Or was he the sound director? Anime News Network put out a good interview with him, and understanding the process he went about creating the soundtrack was kind of enlightening. I didn't think.
Oh yeah,
it didn't occur to me that much work could go into an anime soundtrack.
He's a Westerner, right?
Australian, yeah.
Oh yeah, the soundtrack is really good too.
Yeah, I'm not much of a music guy, so I can't really say much beyond I really like the soundtrack. So that's that.
Yeah, I really like the soundtrack too.
The ED, whenever it played, I just really want a game, like a dungeon crawler game.
Oh yeah, it made me kind of want to boot up Minecraft at some points. Yeah, I the whole exploring thing. Yeah.
Well, I want to make the point. I don't know if it's necessarily exploring as going on the journey, because they're sort of traveling a well-trodden path, and so I mean, I don't know, that's just one little kind of quibble on it, but yeah, I definitely I think I know what people are trying to mean by it, and I agree with it. There's some wonder to it. Now, I'm just curious if anyone ever played the Mega Man Legends. Doesn't this feel a whole lot like rolling like Mega Man from Mega Man Legends, just like the two main characters?
I think that's getting a bit off topic. Specifically
Okay.
this. I mean, we're already into the 4th hour here, so.
Okay. Well, I mean, if we want to call it quits, we can call it quits. I'm fine either way.
All right. Does anyone have any pressing last thoughts on Made in Abyss, or this season in general? If not, thank everyone who showed up and popped in at the very least for some of you. We may or may not do this next season again. Who knows? Probably will. Otherwise, this was a time. I'll hand it off to Kai for the closing remarks.
I'm gonna stop the recording right now. But just before I do that, like end of the year stuff, I want to try and do that. Don't know where we'll be in on the start of January, but look forward to that and be thinking about the series that in this season and the series that in the season that's airing currently for the end of the year stuff. Anyway, stopping the recording.